Emmett Dalton grew up the youngest of three siblings. His family owned a small hardware store, which had been in the Dalton family for generations. Emmett was always known as the gentle soul of the family, with a kind word for everyone and a willingness to help anyone in need. He had a close relationship with his parents, who cherished his thoughtful and considerate nature. In school, Emmett was not the most popular kid, but he was well-liked for his easygoing attitude and warm smile. He had a small circle of friends who appreciated his loyalty and sense of humor. After graduating high school, Emmett decided to stay in their home to help his parents run the hardware store. He enjoyed the simple life and found contentment in the routine of small-town living. Emmett's relationship with his family was solid. His older siblings had moved to nearby cities but frequently visited, maintaining a strong bond with their youngest brother. Emmett was particularly close to his sister Rachel, who often confided in him and sought his advice. His parents, though traditional in their ways, were supportive of Emmett and proud of the man he had become. Emmett had a few relationships, none of which were particularly serious. He was looking for someone who shared his values and appreciated the quiet life he enjoyed. Lila Renshaw was a strikingly beautiful woman with an air of mystery that captivated those around her. She grew up in the bustling city of Larkspur, a stark contrast to the quiet town. Lila's upbringing was far from idyllic. Her parents had a hard relationship, marked by frequent arguments and bouts of separation. As an only child, Lila often found herself caught in the middle of their conflicts, learning early on how to manipulate situations to her advantage. In her teenage years, Lila developed a reputation for being headstrong and manipulative. She had a string of relationships, each ending in turmoil due to her controlling nature. Lila thrived on power and control, often pushing her partners to the brink with her demanding and possessive behavior. Despite this, her charm and allure made it difficult for people to see her true nature until it was too late. After finishing high school, Lila moved to town in search of a fresh start. She quickly found a job at a local boutique, where her charisma and sales skills made her a favorite among customers. It was here that she met Emmett Dalton, a regular customer who was immediately taken by her beauty and confidence. To Lila, Emmett seemed like the perfect target, a kind, gentle man who was easy to control. Lila's past relationships had always followed a similar pattern. She would charm her way into her partner's life, gradually isolating them from their friends and family. Once she had established control, her true colors would show, leading to intense arguments and emotional manipulation. Her partners often felt trapped, unable to leave due to Lila's relentless grip on their lives. When Lila met Emmett, she saw him as another challenge, someone she could mold and control. She was drawn to his kindness and vulnerability, seeing them as weaknesses she could exploit. Emmett's trusting nature made it easy for Lila to weave her way into his life, slowly isolating him from those who cared about him. To the outside world, Lila and Emmett appeared to be a happy couple, but behind closed doors, a much darker story was unfolding. Emmett first met Lila on a warm summer afternoon at the local boutique. He was shopping for a birthday gift for his mother when Lila, with her striking looks and confident demeanor, offered to help him. Their interaction was brief, but left a lasting impression on Emmett. He couldn't stop thinking about her radiant smile and the way she seemed genuinely interested in helping him. A few days later, Emmett returned to the boutique, this time with the intention of asking Lila out. To his delight, she accepted, and they arranged to meet for coffee at a quaint cafe in town. Their first date was filled with laughter and easy conversation. Lila was charming and attentive, asking Emmett about his life, his family, and his dreams. Emmett felt an immediate connection, believing he had finally found someone who truly understood him. As their relationship progressed, Emmett's friends and family noticed how happy he seemed. Lila often joined him at family gatherings and social events, quickly becoming a familiar face in the community. She seemed to fit right in, and Emmett's parents were pleased to see their son so content. However, there were subtle changes in Emmett that only those closest to him noticed. Lila's charm had a way of overshadowing her more manipulative tendencies. She began to subtly influence Emmett's decisions, steering him away from activities and people she deemed unnecessary. At first, it was small things, like suggesting they spend more time alone together or questioning the motives of his friends. Emmett, eager to please Lila and maintain the harmony of their relationship, often acquiesced to her demands. Lila was meticulous in her approach. She never directly forbade Emmett from seeing his friends or family, but she planted seeds of doubt in his mind. She would mention how certain friends didn't seem to appreciate him, or how his family was overly critical. Emmett, who had always been sensitive to others' opinions, began to internalize these suggestions, gradually distancing himself from his loved ones. Despite these changes, Emmett remained convinced that Lila was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He admired her confidence and believed that she had his best interests at heart. Lila, on the other hand, was pleased with how easily she had managed to isolate Emmett. She felt a sense of power knowing that she was the center of his world, controlling his actions and decisions. Their relationship continued to deepen, with Emmett becoming more dependent on Lila for emotional support and validation. Lila, aware of her influence, began to tighten her grip, ensuring that Emmett had little to no contact with anyone outside their relationship. To the outside world, they appeared to be a perfect couple, but behind closed doors, the dynamics were far more sinister. Emmett's once vibrant social life dwindled to nothing, leaving him isolated and completely under Lila's control. As the months passed, Lila's control over Emmett grew stronger. She employed subtle yet effective methods to isolate him from his family and friends, ensuring that he remained entirely dependent on her. It started with casual suggestions and offhand comments, but gradually, her tactics became more manipulative and deliberate. One evening, as Emmett prepared to meet his sister Rachel for dinner, Lila expressed concern about his family's influence on him. She mentioned how they always seemed to criticize their relationship and hinted that perhaps they didn't truly want him to be happy. Emmett, already sensitive to his family's opinions, began to doubt their intentions. He canceled the dinner, opting instead to stay home with Lila. Lila also made it a point to be present whenever Emmett received phone calls from friends or family. She would sit close by, making him uncomfortable and self-conscious about the conversation. Over time, Emmett's calls to his loved ones became less frequent as he grew tired of the tension it caused. His friends noticed his absence from social gatherings and reached out, but Lila always found a way to intercept their messages or make excuses for why Emmett couldn't attend. Lila's control extended to Emmett's daily routines and activities. She insisted on accompanying him everywhere, from grocery shopping to his volunteer work at the local community center. Emmett, eager to keep the peace, didn't resist. He began to feel suffocated, but he couldn't pinpoint the source of his discomfort. Lila's constant presence and influence made it difficult for him to think clearly or make decisions independently. One particularly telling incident occurred when Emmett's childhood friend, Leo, invited him on a weekend fishing trip. Emmett, excited about the prospect of reconnecting with Leo, shared the news with Lila. Her reaction was swift and intense. She questioned Leo's motives, suggesting that he was trying to pull Emmett away from their relationship. Lila accused Emmett of being inconsiderate, claiming that he was abandoning her for a frivolous outing. Emmett, caught off guard by her emotional outburst, reluctantly declined Leo's invitation. Lila's manipulation didn't stop there. She began to control Emmett's finances, convincing him to merge their bank accounts for convenience. This move further isolated Emmett, as he now had limited access to his own money. Lila monitored his spending closely, questioning every purchase and often overriding his decisions. Emmett felt increasingly powerless, unable to assert himself without facing Lila's wrath. Despite these red flags, Emmett continued to believe that Lila had his best interests at heart. He rationalized her behavior as a sign of her deep love and commitment to their relationship. However, the isolation took a toll on his mental and emotional well-being. He became withdrawn and anxious, struggling to reconcile his love for Lila with the growing sense of entrapment. Lila, sensing Emmett's inner turmoil, doubled down on her efforts to isolate him. She discouraged him from seeking help or confiding in others, framing it as a betrayal of their trust. Emmett, already emotionally fragile, complied. He cut off contact with the few remaining friends and family members he had left, fully entrusting his life to Lila's control. As the months turned into a year, Emmett's world became smaller and more confined. His once vibrant and fulfilling life was reduced to the narrow confines of his relationship with Lila. The community, unaware of the turmoil behind closed doors, continued to see them as a happy couple. Despite Lila's control, there were moments when he longed for the comfort and support of his family and friends. These flickers of desire for connection were met with resistance from Lila, who sensed that she was losing her grip on him. One afternoon, Emmett found himself standing outside the hardware store, reminiscing about the days when he would work alongside his father. He missed the camaraderie of the small community and the simple joys of his previous life. On an impulse, he decided to visit his parents, hoping for a moment of normalcy and perhaps a chance to explain his absence. When Emmett arrived at his parents' house, they were overjoyed to see him. His mother, Eleanor, embraced him tightly, her eyes filled with concern. His father, Thomas, greeted him with a firm handshake, his expression a mix of relief and worry. Emmett felt a surge of emotion as he sat down with his parents, who eagerly caught him up on family news and events. For a brief moment, Emmett felt like himself again, surrounded by the warmth and familiarity of his family. However, as the visit progressed, he could sense Lila's disapproval hanging over him like a dark cloud. She had called him multiple times during the visit, each call more insistent than the last. Emmett's parents noticed his unease and gently probed, asking if everything was all right. Emmett hesitated, but eventually confided in his parents about the strain he was feeling. He didn't go into detail about Lila's manipulative behavior, but he mentioned feeling overwhelmed and isolated. Eleanor and Thomas listened attentively, offering their support and urging Emmett to reach out more often. They assured him that he was always welcome and that they would help him in any way they could. Leaving his parents' house that day, Emmett felt a glimmer of hope. He resolved to reconnect with his family and friends, believing that their support would help him regain a sense of normalcy. However, when he returned home, Lila was waiting for him, her eyes cold and calculating. Lila's anger was palpable. She accused Emmett of betraying her trust and undermining their relationship. She framed his visit to his parents as a deliberate attempt to distance himself from her. Emmett, caught off guard by her intensity, tried to explain that he simply missed his family and needed their support. But Lila wouldn't hear of it. She berated him, using emotional manipulation to make him feel guilty and ashamed. The following days were a nightmare for Emmett. Lila's controlling behavior escalated, and she became more possessive and paranoid. She monitored his every move, checking his phone and questioning his whereabouts. Emmett felt trapped, unable to breathe under the suffocating weight of her control. Despite Lila's efforts, Emmett managed to reach out to his sister Rachel through discreet messages. Rachel, sensing her brother's distress, agreed to meet him in secret. They met at a secluded park, where Emmett poured out his heart, revealing the extent of Lila's manipulation and control. Rachel was horrified and immediately offered her support, vowing to help Emmett break free from Lila's grasp. Emmett's attempts to reconnect with his loved ones were fraught with challenges. Lila's influence was pervasive, and she used every tool at her disposal to maintain her control over him. However, the seeds of doubt had been planted in Emmett's mind. He began to see through Lila's facade, recognizing her manipulative tactics for what they were. The more he tried to reconnect with his family and friends, the more determined he became to regain his independence and escape from Lila's clutches. The tension between Emmett and Lila reached a boiling point one fateful evening. Emmett had been secretly meeting with his sister Rachel, seeking her support and advice on how to extricate himself from Lila's control. Rachel, deeply concerned for her brother's well-being, urged him to leave Lila and return to his family. Emmett, emboldened by his sister's encouragement, decided it was time to confront Lila and end their toxic relationship. Emmett chose a quiet Sunday afternoon to break the news to Lila. He hoped that the calmness of the day would help keep the situation from escalating. As they sat in their living room, Emmett took a deep breath and told Lila that he needed some space and time apart. He explained that he felt suffocated and isolated, and that he needed to reconnect with his family and friends to find himself again. Lila's reaction was immediate and explosive. She accused Emmett of being ungrateful and selfish, of abandoning the relationship they had built together. Her voice rose in anger, and she began to hurl insults and accusations, attempting to undermine Emmett's resolve. She claimed that his family and friends didn't truly care about him, that they only wanted to control him and pull him away from her. Emmett tried to remain calm, but Lila's relentless tirade wore him down. He felt a mix of anger, guilt, and sadness as he listened to her venomous words. Despite her emotional manipulation, Emmett knew that he couldn't continue living under her control. He stood his ground, repeating his need for space and asserting that he was making the decision for his own well-being. Lila, realizing that her usual tactics were not working, shifted her approach. She broke down in tears, pleading with Emmett to reconsider. She promised to change, to give him more freedom, and to be more understanding. Emmett, seeing through her manipulative behavior, remained firm in his decision. He told her that he needed to leave and that it was the best thing for both of them. The atmosphere in the room grew tense and charged with emotion. Lila's tears quickly turned to anger again, and she lashed out, accusing Emmett of cheating and betrayal. Emmett, exhausted and emotionally drained, decided to leave the house for a while to clear his head. He grabbed his jacket and walked out the door, leaving Lila seething with rage. When Emmett finally returned home, he found Lila waiting for him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She approached him with a calm demeanor, apologizing for her outburst and begging for another chance. Emmett, though sympathetic to her pain, stood his ground and reiterated his need for space. That night, as Emmett tried to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Lila's behavior had become increasingly erratic, and he feared that her desperation might drive her to do something drastic. His instincts were correct. In the early hours of the morning, Emmett was awakened by a noise in the living room. He got up to investigate and found Lila sitting on the couch, clutching a large kitchen knife. Her eyes were wild with desperation and anger. Emmett's heart raced as he tried to talk her down, but Lila's mind was made up. She accused Emmett of ruining her life, of turning everyone against her. In a fit of rage, she lunged at him with the knife. Emmett managed to dodge her initial attack, but Lila was relentless. A struggle ensued, with Emmett trying to disarm Lila while avoiding her frantic swings. In the chaos, Lila's grip on the knife slipped, and Emmett seized the opportunity to wrest it from her hand. In the aftermath of the struggle, both were left breathless and shaken. Emmett, now holding the knife, dropped it and stepped back, giving Lila space to calm down. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Emmett knew he had to leave. He quickly packed a bag and, without looking back, walked out of the house, leaving Lila behind. He drove to his parents' home, where he was welcomed with open arms, as he told them everything that just happened. Emmett knew that the road to recovery would be long and difficult, but he was ready to take the first step. Lila, consumed by a mix of rage and despair, couldn't accept the loss of control over Emmett. Her mind raced with thoughts of revenge and retribution. She felt humiliated and abandoned, and her desperation turned into a dangerous resolve. In the days following Emmett's departure, Lila's behavior became increasingly insane. She spent hours pacing the house, plotting ways to regain control over Emmett. Her anger festered, and she began to see his decision to leave as an unforgivable betrayal. Lila convinced herself that Emmett's family and friends were to blame for his decision, and she resolved to make him pay for abandoning her. One evening, as Emmett was visiting his parents, Lila devised a plan. She knew that Emmett often took a walk through a secluded part of town in the evenings to clear his head. She decided to confront him there, away from prying eyes. Armed with the same kitchen knife from their previous altercation, Lila set out to intercept Emmett. As Emmett approached a secluded park, he was startled to see Lila standing there, her eyes fixed on him. He stopped in his tracks, a mix of fear and sadness washing over him. Lila's appearance was disheveled, and her eyes burned with a dangerous intensity. Emmett knew that this confrontation could not end well. Lila's voice was cold and menacing, as she accused Emmett of ruining her life. She blamed him for her misery and demanded that he return to her. Emmett tried to reason with her, explaining that their relationship was toxic and that he needed to move on for his own well-being. But Lila was beyond reason. In a sudden violent outburst, Lila lunged at Emmett with the knife. Emmett tried to defend himself, but Lila's rage gave her a frightening strength. A struggle ensued, with Emmett desperately trying to disarm her. In the chaos, Lila managed to stab Emmett, the blade piercing his side. Emmett cried out in pain, but Lila showed no signs of stopping. As Emmett fell to the ground clutching his wound, Lila stood over him, her face contorted with fury and madness. Emmett, weakened and bleeding, pleaded with her to stop, but his words fell on deaf ears. Lila, consumed by her desire for control and revenge, delivered a final fatal blow. The once peaceful park was now a crime scene, with Emmett lying lifeless on the ground. Lila, covered in his blood, stood there for a moment, her mind slowly registering the reality of what she had done. Realizing that she couldn't stay there, Lila fled the scene, leaving Emmett's body behind. She drove aimlessly through the night, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. She knew that it was only a matter of time before the police would come looking for her. The next morning, Emmett's body was discovered by a passerby who immediately called the police. The murder of Emmett Dalton sent shockwaves through the community, a town unaccustomed to such violence. The local police, led by Detective Samuel Carter, launched a thorough investigation to uncover the truth behind Emmett's tragic death. As the news spread, the tight-knit community rallied around Emmett's family, offering support and demanding justice. Detective Carter, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving complex cases, began his work by examining the crime scene. The secluded park where Emmett's body was found offered little in the way of witnesses, but the brutality of the attack indicated a crime of passion. The wounds on Emmett's body suggested a frenzied assault, pointing to someone who knew him well. The investigation quickly focused on Lila Renshaw, Emmett's estranged girlfriend. Neighbors and acquaintances described their tumultuous relationship, with several recounting instances of Lila's controlling behavior. Emmett's family provided crucial insights into the couple's recent conflicts and Emmett's attempts to distance himself from Lila. These testimonies painted a picture of a relationship marked by manipulation, culminating in a fatal confrontation. Detective Carter and his team conducted a thorough search of Lila's home, uncovering several pieces of incriminating evidence. They found Emmett's blood on Lila's clothing and the kitchen knife used in the attack hidden in a drawer. Lila's phone records showed multiple calls to Emmett on the night of the murder, further implicating her in the crime. As the evidence mounted, the police issued an arrest warrant for Lila. She was located in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, attempting to evade capture. When the police arrived, Lila offered little resistance, her demeanor one of resignation. The trial was a highly publicized event, drawing attention from the local community. Emmett's family attended every session, their presence a poignant reminder of the loss they had suffered. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing Lila's manipulative behavior and the violent nature of the crime. Witnesses testified about Lila's possessiveness and her efforts to isolate Emmett from his loved ones. Lila's defense team attempted to portray her as a victim of circumstance, arguing that she had acted in a moment of emotional turmoil. However, the overwhelming evidence, coupled with Lila's lack of remorse, left little room for doubt. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning a guilty verdict. Lila was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Her conviction brought a sense of closure to Emmett's family, though the pain of their loss would never fully heal. The community mourned the senseless death of one of its own, grappling with the realization that such darkness could exist in their midst. The story of Emmett Dalton and Lila Renshaw became a lasting reminder of the importance of recognizing and addressing the signs of abuse. It highlighted the need for community support and the power of collective action in creating a safer world for everyone. On a crisp autumn morning in 2019, the body of Samantha Davenport was discovered in the basement of her modest suburban home, the victim of a brutal and ritualistic murder. At the center of this horrifying tale was Josh Davenport, a 48-year-old insurance adjuster whose unremarkable life belied the shocking acts he would eventually commit. To his neighbors, Josh was a quiet, somewhat awkward man who kept to himself. Few could have imagined the turmoil brewing beneath his placid exterior, or the sinister forces that would ultimately drive him to murder. Josh Davenport's journey to becoming a murderer began long before he ever logged onto the dark web. Born in 1971 to working-class parents, Josh was a shy and introverted child who struggled to form meaningful connections with his peers. His father, a stern factory worker, showed little affection and often berated Josh for his lack of athletic prowess and social skills. His mother, though loving, was overwhelmed by her own struggles with depression and was unable to provide the emotional support Josh desperately needed. Throughout his school years, Josh found solace in books and computers, excelling academically but failing to develop the social skills necessary to navigate the complexities of human relationships. He graduated high school with honors, but opted to attend the local community college, rather than venturing away from the familiar confines of his town. It was during his college years that Josh experienced his first taste of romantic connection. Samantha, a kind-hearted nursing student, saw past Josh's awkward exterior and was drawn to his intelligence and quiet sensitivity. Their relationship blossomed, and for a time Josh believed he had found the acceptance and love he had always craved. After graduation, Josh secured a job as an insurance adjuster at a local firm, while Samantha began her career as a registered nurse at a general hospital. They married in 1996, settling into a modest home not far from where Josh had grown up. For the first few years, their life together seemed idyllic, but cracks soon began to appear in their relationship. Josh's innate insecurity and fear of abandonment manifested as jealousy and possessiveness. He grew increasingly paranoid about Samantha's interactions with male colleagues and patients, often accusing her of infidelity without cause. Samantha, in turn, became frustrated with Josh's lack of emotional maturity and his inability to trust her. Their arguments grew more frequent and intense, driving a wedge between them that widened with each passing year. As he approached middle age, Josh found himself grappling with a profound sense of disappointment and failure. His career had stagnated, with younger colleagues passing him by for promotions. The dream of starting a family had long since faded, as fertility issues and the strain on their marriage made parenthood an increasingly distant possibility. By his mid-40s, Josh had become a shell of his former self. He went through the motions at work, returning home each evening to a house filled with tension and unspoken resentment. Samantha had grown distant, throwing herself into her career and volunteer work, leaving Josh to confront his loneliness and sense of inadequacy and solitude. It was in this state of desperation and vulnerability that Josh first turned to the internet as a means of escape. What began as harmless browsing of forums and chat rooms gradually led him to explore darker corners of the web, searching for anything to fill the void that had consumed his life. Little did he know that this digital journey would lead him to the doorstep of a group that would exploit his weaknesses and set him on a path to unimaginable darkness. Josh's descent into the world of the dark web began innocuously enough. Late one night, unable to sleep and desperate for some form of human connection, he found himself browsing online forums dedicated to topics ranging from conspiracy theories to the occult. These digital spaces offered Josh a sense of anonymity and acceptance he had never experienced in his day-to-day life. As he delved deeper into these online communities, Josh encountered mentions of the dark web, a hidden part of the internet, accessible only through specialized software. Initially, Josh's forays into the dark web were driven by curiosity rather than malice. He marveled at the vast array of information and services available, both legal and illegal. Josh's exploration of the dark web coincided with a particularly difficult period in his marriage. Samantha had recently received a promotion at work, which only served to highlight Josh's own career stagnation. Their arguments had become more frequent and bitter, often ending with Samantha sleeping in the spare bedroom. The dark web became Josh's refuge, a place where he could escape the failures and disappointments of his real life. It was during one of his late-night browsing sessions that Josh stumbled upon a forum. The site's black background and crimson text created an aura of mystery and danger that immediately captivated Josh. As he read through the posts, he found discussions of ancient rituals, dark powers, and the promise of transformation for those deemed worthy. Something about the forum's blend of occult knowledge and promises of personal empowerment resonated deeply with Josh. Here was a group that seemed to offer the sense of purpose and belonging he had craved his entire life. Despite a faint voice of caution in the back of his mind, Josh created an account and made his first post, introducing himself as a seeker of hidden truths. The response was almost immediate. Within minutes, Josh received welcoming messages from other members, each more effusive than the last. As he basked in this sudden attention and acceptance, Josh failed to recognize the predatory nature of the interest being shown in him. He had taken his first step into a world that would ultimately consume him, setting in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy and horror. The forum was far more than just another dark web cult. It was a carefully constructed digital ecosystem designed to identify, manipulate, and exploit vulnerable individuals like Josh Davenport. At its core, the group presented itself as a modern mystery cult, blending elements of ancient paganism, satanic imagery, and New Age spirituality into a seductive tapestry of esoteric knowledge and promised power. The forum's structure was deceptively simple at first glance. New members like Josh started in the outer circle, known as the Seekers. Here they were encouraged to share their personal struggles and desires, all under the guise of seeking spiritual guidance. More experienced members, called guides, would respond with carefully crafted messages of support and understanding, gradually introducing the group's core beliefs and practices. As seekers proved their dedication through active participation and completion of assigned spiritual exercises, they could progress to the rank of initiate. This inner circle had access to more specialized sub-forums and one-on-one mentoring sessions with higher-ranking members. It was at this level that the true nature of the cult began to reveal itself, with discussions of blood rituals, sacrificial magic, and the accumulation of dark energies. At the pinnacle of the dark forum stood the enigmatic figure known only as the Crimson Prophet. This individual, whose true identity remained a closely guarded secret, was revered by cult members as a direct conduit to ancient and powerful dark forces. The Crimson Prophet's posts were rare but always impactful, written in a cryptic style that invited multiple interpretations and sparked fierce debates among the followers. Key members of the cult played specific roles in the indoctrination and manipulation of newcomers like Josh. There was Midnight Whisper, a self-proclaimed empath who excelled at identifying and exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. Darksage served as the group's lore master, weaving together mythologies and occult traditions to create a compelling narrative of secret knowledge. Shadowwalker acted as the cult's enforcer, subtly threatening those who showed signs of doubt or resistance. The beliefs propagated by the cult of the Forum were a toxic blend of fatalism, elitism, and promised salvation through darkness. Members were taught that the world was inherently corrupt and that true power could only be achieved by embracing humanity's darkest impulses. The cult preached that certain individuals, their followers, were chosen by dark forces to bring about a new age of chaos and transformation. Rituals played a central role in the cult's practices. These began as seemingly harmless meditation exercises and symbolic gestures performed in front of webcams. However, as members progressed through the ranks, the rituals became increasingly extreme, often involving self-harm, sexual degradation, and eventually, acts of violence against others. Financial exploitation was another key aspect of the cult's operations. Members were encouraged to make offerings to prove their dedication, with higher ranks requiring ever larger financial commitments. As Josh Davenport delved deeper into the cult, he remained unaware of the full scope of the organization he had joined. Josh's progression from seeker to initiate was rapid, fueled by his desperate need for acceptance and his willingness to embrace the cult's teachings. He eagerly completed each assigned task, from meditation exercises focused on channeling dark energies to more disturbing activities like recording himself reciting blasphemous oaths in front of a makeshift altar. As Josh delved deeper into the cult's ideology, his behavior in the real world began to change noticeably. He grew more withdrawn at work, his performance slipping to the point where he received a formal warning from his supervisor. At home, the distance between him and Samantha widened into an unbridgeable chasm. When she attempted to discuss her concerns about his changed demeanor, Josh reacted with uncharacteristic anger, accusing her of trying to hold him back from his true potential. The rituals Josh performed grew increasingly extreme. What began as simple candle-lighting ceremonies evolved into bloodletting rituals, with Josh using a ceremonial dagger, provided by the cult, to make small cuts on his arms and chest. He meticulously documented these acts, sharing the images with his online mentors who praised his dedication and promised that greater power awaited him. Josh's physical appearance began to deteriorate as he neglected his health in favor of spending more time online. He lost weight. His skin took on a pallid hue and dark circles formed under his eyes from countless nights spent hunched over his computer screen. Samantha's pleas for him to seek help fell on deaf ears, as Josh convinced himself that she simply couldn't understand the profound transformation he was undergoing. As Josh progressed through the ranks of the cult, he was granted access to more exclusive areas of the forum. Here, he encountered discussions of even darker practices, including animal sacrifice and the harnessing of sexual energy for magical purposes. The turning point came when Josh was selected for a one-on-one digital audience with the Crimson Prophet. This rare honor filled Josh with a sense of pride and purpose he hadn't felt in years. As he sat before his computer, heart racing in anticipation, Josh felt that he was on the verge of unlocking the secrets of the universe. He had no way of knowing that this conversation would set in motion a series of events that would lead to tragedy and the destruction of everything he had ever known. The digital audience with the Crimson Prophet marked a critical juncture in Josh's descent into darkness. The encounter was carefully orchestrated to maximize its psychological impact, with Josh instructed to prepare his sacred space, don ceremonial robes, and engage in a preparatory ritual involving meditation and self-flagellation. "The prophet, you have been chosen," the message began. "You stand at the threshold of true power, but the path forward requires the ultimate sacrifice. Are you prepared to shed the last vestiges of your former self and embrace the darkness that will set you free?" Josh's fingers trembled as he typed his response. "I am ready, great prophet. Tell me what I must do." What followed was a masterclass in manipulation. The Crimson Prophet began by reinforcing Josh's sense of specialness and destiny. They wove a narrative that recast Josh's life struggles as tests of worthiness, positioning him as a long-awaited messiah figure within the cult's mythology. The prophet then began to probe Josh's psyche, asking pointed questions about his relationships, particularly with Samantha. Josh, his inhibitions lowered by the intoxicating atmosphere of the encounter, poured out his frustrations and resentments. He spoke of feeling emasculated by Samantha's success, of the gnawing fear that she would leave him for someone better. With each confession, the prophet offered validation and twisted guidance. "Your wife is an anchor, holding you back from your true potential," the prophet declared. "She is a servant of the light, unconsciously working to suppress your growing power. As long as she lives, you can never fully embrace your destiny." The suggestion of violence was introduced gradually, cloaked in the language of ritual and sacrifice. The prophet spoke of ancient rites that required the offering of that which the aspirant held most dear. In Josh's case, the prophet asserted, this could only mean one thing: Samantha's life. By the end of the session, Josh's mind was reeling. The prophet left him with a set of detailed instructions for a ritual that would supposedly unleash his latent powers, a ritual that would culminate in Samantha's death. "Perform this rite, and you will be reborn as a living God," the prophet promised. "Fail and you will be cast out, forever unworthy of the gifts that could have been yours." As the prophet's avatar faded from the screen, Josh sat in stunned silence, the full weight of what he was considering crashing down upon him. A small part of him recognized the madness of what he was contemplating, but that voice was quickly drowned out by the chorus of his own insecurities and the seductive whispers of promised power. The week leading up to the fateful night was a blur of feverish preparation and mounting tension for Josh. By day, he went through the motions of his normal life, his colleagues and even Samantha unaware of the storm raging within him. By night, he meticulously gathered the components for the ritual as specified by the Crimson Prophet: black candles, a silver chalice, a ceremonial dagger with a bone handle, and various herbs and powders of dubious origin. As the designated date approached, Josh's mental state deteriorated rapidly. He barely slept, spending hours poring over the instructions he'd been given, memorizing the incantations and visualizing the act he was about to commit. Samantha, sensing the growing tension, made several attempts to reach out to Josh. She suggested counseling, tried to engage him in conversations about their future, and even planned a weekend getaway in a last-ditch effort to rekindle their connection. Josh rebuffed each overture, his mind already set on the grim task ahead. On the evening of October 15, 2019, Samantha Davenport returned home from her shift at the hospital, exhausted but looking forward to a quiet night with her husband. The house was dark as she entered, save for a faint flickering light emanating from the basement door. Samantha called out Josh's name, receiving no response. Concerned, she made her way down the basement stairs, unaware that she was walking into a nightmare. The scene that greeted Samantha was like something out of a horror film. The basement had been transformed into a macabre ritual space. Flat candles formed a large circle in the center of the room, their flames casting writhing shadows on the walls. Strange symbols had been painted on the floor and walls, in what looked disturbingly like blood. In the center of the circle stood Josh, clad in a black robe, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Samantha, what are you doing here?" Josh's voice was barely recognizable, a hoarse whisper that sent chills down Samantha's spine. "You weren't supposed to be home yet. It's not time." Samantha, frozen in shock and fear, struggled to comprehend the scene before her. "Josh, what is all this? What's going on?" Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the man before her with the husband she thought she knew. Josh's demeanor shifted, a cruel smile playing across his lips. "You're early, my dear, but perhaps this is meant to be. The Dark Lords work in mysterious ways." He gestured for Samantha to enter the circle. "Come, join me, be part of my ascension." As Samantha took a hesitant step backward, Josh lunged forward with surprising speed. He grabbed her arm, his grip like iron, and dragged her into the circle. Samantha's screams were cut short as Josh clamped a hand over her mouth, forcing her to the ground. What followed was a scene of unimaginable horror. Josh, lost in the throes of his delusion, began to recite the incantations he had so carefully memorized. His voice rose and fell in an unnatural cadence as he called upon dark forces that existed only in the twisted mythology of the cult. Samantha fought desperately, but Josh's madness lent him an inhuman strength. He bound her wrists and ankles with cord, heedless of her muffled pleas and tears. As he reached for the ceremonial dagger, a fleeting look of doubt crossed his face. For a moment, the man Samantha had married seemed to resurface, horror dawning in his eyes as he realized what he was about to do. But the moment passed, Josh's features hardened once more as he raised the dagger high. "This is my sacrifice," he intoned. "With this offering, I claim my power and break the chains of my old life." The dagger plunged down, and Samantha's body jerked as the blade pierced her chest. Josh, lost in a frenzy of bloodlust and religious ecstasy, stabbed again and again. As Samantha's life ebbed away, Josh continued the ritual. He collected her blood in the silver chalice, anointed his forehead with it, and chanted the final words of the ceremony. He waited, breathless for the rush of power the Crimson Prophet had promised. Seconds ticked by, then minutes, but nothing changed. The basement remained silent, save for Josh's ragged breathing and the soft hiss of guttering candles. Slowly, terribly, reality began to assert itself. The magnitude of what he had done crashed over Josh like a tidal wave. He looked down at his blood-soaked hands, at the lifeless body of the woman he had once vowed to love and protect, and a wail of anguish tore from his throat. There was no power, no transcendence, only the stark horror of his actions. Josh collapsed beside Samantha's body, cradling her cooling form as sobs racked his body. He remained there through the night, muttering incoherent apologies and pleas for forgiveness to unhearing ears. The discovery of Samantha Davenport's body sent shockwaves through the quiet community. It was the Davenports' next-door neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Winters, who first raised the alarm. Concerned by the absence of any activity from the house and unable to reach either Josh or Samantha by phone, she called the police to perform a wellness check. Officer Mark Ramirez, a seasoned member of the town's police department, arrived at the Davenport residence at approximately 10:30 a.m. on October 15th. His knock went unanswered, but he noticed a faint, unpleasant odor emanating from the house. Following protocol, Officer Ramirez circled the property, finding the back door unlocked. The smell intensified as he entered, leading him to the partially open basement door. What Officer Ramirez discovered in the basement would haunt him for years to come. Samantha's body lay in the center of a crude occult circle, surrounded by burned-out candles and bizarre symbols. Josh sat nearby, catatonic and covered in dried blood, still clutching his wife's lifeless hand. The crime scene investigators who arrived shortly after were confronted with a gruesome tableau that seemed more fitting for a horror movie than a suburban home. Forensic analyst Dr. Lydia Chen later remarked that in her 15 years on the job, she had never seen a crime scene so ritualistic in nature. The investigation, led by Detective Sandra Morris, quickly focused on unraveling the mystery of Josh's apparent descent into madness. A search of the Davenport home revealed a laptop in Josh's study, which proved to be a crucial piece of evidence. Cyber forensics expert Alan Tsung was brought in to analyze its contents. What Tsung discovered was disturbing. Months of forum posts and private messages documenting Josh's involvement with the cult. The sheer volume of data was staggering, painting a clear picture of Josh's gradual indoctrination and the cult's deliberate manipulation of his vulnerabilities. As investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover other cases across the country with similarities to the Davenport murder. A pattern emerged of lonely middle-aged individuals being drawn into the cult and subsequently committing violent acts. Meanwhile, Josh Davenport remained in a near catatonic state, unresponsive to questioning and seemingly unaware of his surroundings. He was placed under psychiatric hold at the local mental health facility, where Dr. Elena Rodriguez took charge of his care. Initial evaluations suggested a complete mental breakdown, with Josh alternating between periods of unresponsiveness and bouts of hysterical rambling about dark lords and promised power. As the investigation progressed, the community struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. A candlelight vigil was held for Samantha, attended by tens of local residents. The breakthrough in the Davenport case came 3 months after the murder, following tireless efforts by a joint task force of local law enforcement and FBI agents. The key to unraveling the mystery lay in a series of encrypted messages recovered from Josh's laptop, which cyber forensics expert Alan Sung finally managed to decode. These messages revealed the true extent of the cult's operations and the sophisticated methods they used to manipulate vulnerable individuals. The cult's leadership structure was exposed, with the identity of the Crimson Prophet traced to a former psychology professor. Armed with this information, investigators coordinated simultaneous raids targeting key members of the cult. Crimson Prophet was apprehended at a remote compound where she had been living under an assumed identity. Josh Davenport finally emerged from his catatonic state. In a series of emotionally charged sessions with Dr. Rodriguez, he began to recount the events leading up to Samantha's murder. Josh's confession, filled with remorse and horror at his own actions, provided crucial details that helped prosecutors build their case against the cult leaders. Expert witnesses testified about the psychological tactics employed by the cult, while former members provided chilling accounts of their experiences. Josh Davenport, deemed mentally unfit to stand trial, was committed to a high-security psychiatric facility. His case became a focal point for discussions about criminal responsibility and the nature of culpability in cases of extreme manipulation. In the aftermath of the trial, lawmakers pushed for new legislation to combat online radicalization and protect vulnerable individuals from predatory groups. For the community, the resolution of the case brought a measure of closure, but the scars left by the tragedy ran deep. The Davenport house, once a crime scene and now a painful reminder, was eventually demolished. In its place, the community erected a small memorial garden dedicated to Samantha and other victims of the cult. The year was 2018, and what began as a seemingly ordinary romance between two young adults would spiral into a nightmare that no one could have foreseen. Michelle Marsters, a 26-year-old aspiring writer with a troubled past, and Jake Brendan, a 28-year-old software engineer from a close-knit family, were an unlikely pair. Their whirlwind romance captivated their friends and family at first, but as time went on, those closest to them began to sense that something was amiss. Michelle Marsters' childhood was a tapestry of instability and emotional turmoil. Born to a single mother who struggled with substance abuse, Michelle spent her formative years bouncing between relatives' homes and foster care. The constant upheaval left deep scars on her psyche, manifesting in an intense fear of abandonment and a desperate need for control in her relationships. As a teenager, Michelle found solace in writing, pouring her pain and longing onto the pages of countless journals. Her talent for crafting vivid narratives earned her a scholarship to a local community college, where she excelled in creative writing courses. However, her personal life remained tumultuous, marked by a series of volatile relationships that always seemed to end in heartbreak and betrayal. Jake Brendan, on the other hand, grew up in a warm and loving household. The middle child of 3, Jake was raised by parents who prioritized family bonds and open communication. Family dinners were a nightly occurrence in the Brendan home, and weekends were often spent on camping trips or gathered around board games. This nurturing environment fostered Jake's natural inclination towards kindness and his strong sense of loyalty to those he loved. Academically gifted, Jake breezed through school and earned a full ride to a prestigious university where he studied computer science. His easygoing nature and quick wit made him popular among his peers, and he maintained a close circle of friends from high school through his college years. Michelle and Jake's paths crossed at a local coffee shop. Michelle, hunched over her laptop, was startled when Jake accidentally bumped into her table, nearly spilling her latte. Flustered, Jake insisted on buying her a new drink, and what started as an awkward encounter quickly blossomed into an engaging conversation about literature, technology, and their shared love of obscure indie films. Drawn to Jake's warmth and stability, Michelle found herself opening up in a way she never had before. Jake, in turn, was captivated by Michelle's passion for storytelling and her apparent vulnerability. They exchanged numbers that night, and within weeks they were practically inseparable. The early days of their relationship were a whirlwind of romantic gestures and shared adventures. Michelle introduced Jake to the world of local poetry slams and art galleries, while Jake taught Michelle the basics of coding and took her on hikes to his favorite scenic spots. To their friends, they seemed like the perfect couple, Jake's calm demeanor perfectly complementing Michelle's creative energy. However, as the honeymoon phase began to wane, subtle cracks started to appear in their idyllic romance. Michelle's need for constant reassurance and her discomfort with Jake's close relationships with his family and friends began to surface. What Jake initially perceived as endearing clinginess slowly morphed into something more sinister. As Michelle and Jake's relationship progressed past the 6-month mark, the initial euphoria of new love began to give way to a more complex and troubling dynamic. Michelle's past traumas and abandonment issues, long simmering beneath the surface, started to manifest in increasingly problematic ways. It started subtly at first. Michelle would text Jake incessantly throughout the day, growing anxious and irritable if he didn't respond promptly. She began to question his whereabouts when they weren't together, often asking for photographic evidence of his location. Jake, attributing this behavior to Michelle's deep affection for him, initially found it endearing and did his best to accommodate her needs. However, Michelle's demands for Jake's time and attention soon began to escalate. She would grow visibly upset when Jake made plans with his friends or family, often guilt-tripping him into canceling to spend time with her instead. Jake's best friend since childhood, Michael, was the first to voice his concerns. During a rare guys' night out, Michael confronted Jake about his increasing absence from their social circle. "Jake, you've barely hung out with us in months. What's going on, man? Is everything okay with you and Michelle?" Jake brushed off Michael's worries, insisting that he was just busy and that everything was fine. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right in his relationship with Michelle. As weeks turned into months, Michelle's behavior became increasingly erratic and controlling. She began to monitor Jake's social media accounts, questioning him about every female interaction, no matter how innocuous. She insisted on knowing his phone password and would often scroll through his messages while he slept. Jake's family, once warmly welcoming of Michelle, started to grow wary of her influence on their son and brother. Sarah Brendan, Jake's mother, was particularly concerned. She noticed how Jake had become withdrawn and less communicative, a stark contrast to the open and affectionate son she had raised. During a family dinner that Michelle reluctantly attended, tensions came to a head. When Sarah innocently asked Jake about his plans to attend his cousin's upcoming wedding, Michelle interjected before he could respond. "We're actually thinking of taking a trip that weekend, aren't we, Jake?" she said, her voice sickly sweet but her eyes flashing with warning. Jake, caught off guard, stumbled through a non-committal response, much to his family's visible dismay. After dinner, Sarah pulled her son aside, her voice low and urgent. "Jake, honey, I'm worried about you. This isn't like you missing family events, barely calling. Is everything all right with Michelle?" Michelle, overhearing the exchange, flew into a rage on the drive home. She accused Jake of allowing his family to come between them, twisting the situation to paint herself as the victim. "Your mother hates me, Jake. She's trying to poison you against me. Can't you see that?" Torn between his love for Michelle and his deep-rooted family ties, Jake found himself walking an increasingly precarious tightrope. He began to make excuses to his family and friends, gradually withdrawing from social engagements and family gatherings to keep the peace with Michelle. As Jake's world shrank to revolve almost entirely around Michelle, her paranoia and possessiveness only intensified. She began to see threats to their relationship everywhere, in Jake's co-workers, in casual interactions with strangers, and especially in his family's attempts to maintain a connection with him. As Michelle's grip on Jake's life tightened, a part of him began to resist. The values instilled by his upbringing, the importance of family, the strength of long-standing friendships started to reassert themselves. This internal conflict came to a head on a chilly November evening, nearly a year into their relationship. Jake received a call from his sister, Lauren, informing him that their father had been hospitalized with a suspected heart attack. Without hesitation, Jake grabbed his keys, ready to rush to the hospital. Michelle, however, had other ideas. "Jake, you can't go," she pleaded. "We were supposed to have dinner together. You promised." Jake, torn between his worry for his father and his fear of upsetting Michelle, tried to reason with her. Michelle's face contorted with rage. "Your family again," she spat. "They're always trying to take you away from me. If you leave now, don't bother coming back." For the first time, Jake saw through the haze of manipulation. The absurdity of Michelle's demand in the face of a family emergency snapped something inside him. Without another word, he walked out the door, leaving Michelle screaming behind him. At the hospital, surrounded by the warmth and support of his family, Jake felt as if he was waking from a long, confusing dream. His father's condition, thankfully, turned out to be less serious than initially feared. As Jake sat in the waiting room, his mother gently broached the subject they had all been avoiding. Jake, his defenses weakened by the night's events, finally opened up. He shared with his mother the extent of Michelle's controlling behavior, her jealousy, and her attempts to isolate him. Sarah listened, her heart breaking for her son, but also relieved that he was finally seeing the truth. Over the next few days, as his father recovered, Jake spent more time with his family. He reconnected with friends he had neglected, realizing how much he had missed their company. Michelle's incessant calls and messages went unanswered, as Jake took time to reflect on their relationship. When Jake finally returned to the apartment he shared with Michelle, he was resolved to end things. Michelle, however, sensed the shift in Jake's demeanor and launched into a preemptive attack. "It's your mother, isn't it? She's turned you against me. I knew she hated me." Michelle's words devolved into a torrent of abuse aimed at Jake's family, particularly his mother. "Jake, I can't do this anymore. I won't cut my family out of my life for you or anyone else." As Jake turned to leave, Michelle's face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. Jake left, shaken but determined, unaware of the chilling prophecy contained in Michelle's parting words. The events of March 15, 2019 would forever be etched in the memories of Queenstown's residents. It began as an ordinary Friday, people hurrying to work, children boarding school buses, the usual rhythm of small-town life in full swing. For Sarah Brendan, it started as a day like any other, filled with routine tasks and errands. Sarah had just returned home from her morning yoga class, her mind preoccupied with plans for the weekend. Jake had promised to come over for a family dinner on Sunday, the first in months, and Sarah was determined to make it special. As she pulled into her driveway, she noticed an unfamiliar car parked across the street, but thought nothing of it. Humming softly, Sarah unlocked her front door and stepped inside, her arms laden with groceries. She didn't notice the shadow that detached itself from the side of the house and silently followed her in. Michelle Marsters, her eyes wild with a manic gleam, had been waiting for hours. In her delusional state, she had convinced herself that Sarah was the root of all her problems. Remove Sarah, she thought, and Jake would be hers completely. As Sarah bent to set her bags on the kitchen counter, Michelle struck. With a guttural cry of rage, she brought a heavy cast-iron skillet, grabbed from Sarah's own kitchen, crashing down on the woman's head. Sarah crumpled to the floor, dazed and disoriented. Blood trickled from a gash on her scalp. Michelle, consumed by her frenzy, didn't stop. She brought the skillet down again and again, Sarah's weak attempts at self-defense growing feebler with each blow. When it was over, Michelle stood panting over Sarah's motionless form. Blood spattered her clothes and face. In Michelle's twisted mind, she had done what was necessary. She had eliminated the threat to her relationship with Jake. Now, she reasoned, he would have no choice but to turn to her for comfort and support. With a clinical detachment that would later disturb even seasoned investigators, Michelle set about staging the scene. She ransacked the house, overturning furniture and emptying drawers, creating the illusion of a robbery gone wrong. She pocketed Sarah's jewelry and cash, planning to dispose of them later. In the bathroom, Michelle scrubbed the blood from her skin and changed into clean clothes she had brought with her. She wrapped her stained garments and the skillet in a plastic bag, intending to discard them far from the scene. As a final touch, Michelle used Sarah's own phone to send a text to Jake. "Looking forward to Sunday dinner, sweetheart. Love you." It was a chilling detail that would later send shivers down the spines of those involved in the case. Confident that she had covered her tracks, Michelle left the Brendan home as quietly as she had entered. To any passers-by, she would have looked like any other young woman going about her day, not someone who had just committed a brutal murder. Michelle drove to a remote area outside of town, where she burned her bloodied clothes and tossed the skillet into a deep pond. Returning to her apartment, Michelle began to craft her alibi. She called a friend, chatting normally about weekend plans. She posted on social media, careful to establish a timeline that placed her far from the Brendan home at the time of the murder. Then she waited. Hours passed, and as the sun began to set, Michelle's phone rang. It was Jake, his voice cracking with emotion. "Michelle," he sobbed, "something terrible has happened. It's my mom, she's dead." Michelle's performance was Oscar-worthy. She gasped in shock, her voice filled with false concern and sympathy. "Oh my God, Jake, what happened? Are you okay? Where are you? I'm coming right over." Everything was going according to plan. Soon, she thought, Jake would be utterly dependent on her. The discovery of Sarah Brendan's body sent shockwaves through the quiet community. Jake, worried when his mother didn't answer his calls about Sunday dinner, had driven to her house to check on her. The scene that greeted him would haunt him for years to come. Detective Lisa Martinez, a veteran of the police department, took charge of the investigation. From the moment she stepped into the Brendan home, something about the scene didn't sit right with her. While it appeared to be a robbery gone wrong, certain details nagged at her experienced instincts. The house had been ransacked, true, but in a way that seemed almost methodical, rather than the chaotic ransacking typical of a panicked burglar. Valuable electronics were left untouched, while jewelry and cash were missing. Most tellingly, there were no signs of forced entry. As the forensics team combed through the house, Detective Martinez began the painful process of interviewing the family. Jake, still in shock, could barely string together coherent sentences. His father, recently released from the hospital, was devastated and confused. It was Jake's sister Lauren who provided the first piece of the puzzle that would ultimately lead to Michelle. Detective Lauren said, "I don't know if this is important, but Jake's girlfriend, Michelle, she's been acting really strange lately. She seemed obsessed with Jake, always trying to keep him away from us." Martinez's interest was piqued. She gently probed for more information, and Lauren opened up about the gradual isolation Jake had experienced, the tension between Michelle and their mother, and the recent confrontation that had led to Jake spending more time with his family. The detective's suspicions grew as she interviewed Jake's friends and coworkers. A picture began to emerge of Michelle as a controlling, paranoid partner who had systematically attempted to cut Jake off from his support network. However, suspicion was not proof, and Martinez knew she needed hard evidence. Forensics provided the next breakthrough. Despite the killer's efforts to clean up, trace amounts of blood were found in areas inconsistent with the location of Sarah's body. DNA analysis would later confirm it was a mix of Sarah's blood and the killer's. Moreover, fibers found on Sarah's clothing didn't match anything in her home. Martinez's team began the painstaking process of checking traffic cameras and interviewing neighbors. One elderly woman recalled seeing a car similar to Michelle's parked on the street the morning of the murder, but couldn't be certain. As the investigation progressed, Martinez brought Michelle in for questioning. Michelle arrived at the station projecting an image of concern and cooperation, but the detective's trained eye noted the subtle signs of anxiety, the slight tremor in her hands, the occasional darting of her eyes. "Michelle," Martinez began, her tone casual, "can you tell me where you were on the morning of March 15th? Michelle's response was smooth, rehearsed. She claimed to have been at a local cafe, working on her latest writing project. She even produced a receipt as proof. But something about her story didn't add up. Martinez decided to take a risk. "Michelle," she said, leaning forward, "we have a witness who saw your car near the Brendan home on the morning of the murder. Want to revise your statement?" Michelle's composure cracked for just a moment, a flash of panic in her eyes, a slight hitch in her breathing. She quickly recovered, vehemently denying the accusation, but Martinez had seen enough. The investigation was far from over, but Martinez felt they were on the right track. Little did she know that the case was about to break wide open, thanks to an unexpected source, Jake himself. In the days following his mother's murder, Jake Brendan found himself in a fog of grief and confusion. Michelle was a constant presence, offering comfort and support. As the initial shock began to wear off, Jake started to notice inconsistencies in Michelle's behavior that gnawed at him. It was a small thing that first aroused his suspicions. While looking for a photo of his mother for the funeral service, Jake came across Michelle's journal. Normally, he would have respected her privacy, but a nagging feeling prompted him to open it. What he found chilled him to the bone. Page after page was filled with increasingly paranoid and violent rants about his mother. "Sarah's trying to turn him against me. She has to be stopped. I'm the only one who truly loves him." The last entry, dated the day before the murder, read simply, "Tomorrow I'll fix everything." He wanted to dismiss the idea, but too many pieces were falling into place. Michelle's obsessive behavior, her hatred of his mother, Her insistence on being with him constantly since the murder, torn between his loyalty to Michelle and his growing suspicions, Jake decided to confide in Detective Martinez. He brought the journal to the police station, his hands shaking as he handed it over. "I think Michelle might have had something to do with my mom's death." Martinez's team quickly obtained a warrant to search Michelle and Jake's apartment. Hidden in the back of a closet, they found a bag containing Sarah's missing jewelry. In a stroke of luck, the pond where Michelle had disposed of the murder weapon had been partially drained for maintenance, revealing the blood-stained skillet. As the evidence mounted, Michelle's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Her alibi fell apart under scrutiny. The cafe receipt she had produced was for a different day, and security footage showed her car leaving town in the direction of the Brendan home on the morning of the murder. Jake, grappling with the betrayal and the horrifying realization of what Michelle had done, agreed to cooperate with the police. In a recorded phone call, he confronted Michelle about his suspicions. Caught off guard, Michelle's responses were incriminating. "Why did you do it, Michelle? I loved you." Michelle's response was chilling in its delusion. "I did it for us, Jake," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Your mother was trying to keep us apart. Now we can be together forever. Don't you see? It was the only way." With this final piece of evidence, Detective Martinez moved to make an arrest. The stage was set for Michelle's arrest, but even Martinez couldn't have predicted the dramatic turn of events that would unfold as they moved to take her into custody. Michelle, unaware that her world was about to come crashing down, was inside a bookstore. Martinez had decided on a public arrest to minimize the risk of Michelle doing something desperate. As Michelle exited the store, two plainclothes officers approached her casually. "Michelle Marsters?" One of them said. "We need you to come with us." For a moment, Michelle froze, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Then, in a burst of panic, she turned and ran. She made it only a few steps before Martinez tackled her to the ground. As the detective handcuffed her, Michelle began to scream. "You don't understand. I did it for love. Jake needs me." At the police station, Michelle was led to an interrogation room where Martinez was waiting. For hours, Michelle maintained her innocence, her story becoming increasingly convoluted as she tried to explain away the evidence. Martinez watched patiently, waiting for the right moment to break through Michelle's defenses. Finally, as exhaustion and the weight of her lies began to take their toll, Martinez played her trump card. She placed Jake's journal in front of Michelle. "Jake found your journal. He knows what you did." The effect was immediate. Michelle's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He wasn't supposed to find out," she whispered. "It was supposed to be our fresh start." What followed was a chilling confession that left even the seasoned detective shaken. Michelle described in vivid detail how she had planned and carried out Sarah's murder, her voice devoid of remorse as she recounted the brutal attack. "I had to do it," Michelle insisted, her eyes fever-bright. "Sarah was poisoning Jake against me. She never understood our love. With her gone, Jake would need me. We would be together forever." When the confession was complete, Michelle seemed to deflate, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. "What's going to happen to me?" she asked, suddenly sounding very young and afraid. The prosecutor presented a methodical, airtight case. She walked the jury through the evidence. The DNA found at the crime scene, the murder weapon recovered from the pond, the damning entries in Michelle's journal, and finally, Michelle's own recorded confession. Perhaps the most powerful moment of the prosecution's case came when Jake took the stand. His testimony was heart-wrenching, detailing the gradual isolation he experienced and his growing unease with Michelle's behavior. The defense faced an uphill battle. Given the overwhelming evidence, Stevenson opted for a mental health defense, arguing that Michelle's troubled background and psychological issues had left her incapable of distinguishing right from wrong. Psychiatrists took the stand, offering conflicting opinions on Michelle's mental state. Dr. Samantha Wright, testifying for the defense, diagnosed Michelle with borderline personality disorder and argued that her extreme fear of abandonment had driven her to commit the murder. Throughout the trial, Michelle sat at the defense table, often appearing detached from the proceedings. After a week-long trial, the jury retired to deliberate. They returned after just 6 hours with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. As the verdict was read, Michelle finally broke her eerie calm, collapsing in sobs. Michelle Marsters, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, retreated into a world of fantasy behind bars. She continued to write, filling notebooks with stories of star-crossed lovers and tragic romances, unable or unwilling to fully grasp the reality of her crimes. For the residents of Queenstown, the case served as a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers come from where we least expect them. It was a tragedy that would be remembered for years to come, a cautionary tale about the dark side of love and the devastating consequences of unchecked obsession. Andrew and Paula Keene's love story began like many others in Pinewood, at the annual Harvest Festival 15 years earlier. Andrew, then a shy graduate student, had volunteered to run the physics demonstration booth. Paula, home from college for the weekend, found herself captivated by his passionate explanation of physics. Their courtship was a whirlwind of outdoor adventures and cozy evenings, discussing their dreams for the future. Paula was drawn to Andrew's quiet intensity and brilliant mind, while Andrew was in awe of Paula's confidence and zest for life. They married 2 years later in a simple ceremony by Pinewood Lake, their vows echoing off the surrounding mountains as friends and family cheered. The early years of their marriage were filled with the joy of building a life together. They bought a charming craftsman-style home on Maple Street, its wrap-around porch soon cluttered with Paula's collection of potted herbs and Andrew's telescope. Weekends were spent hiking the nearby trails or hosting game nights with their growing circle of friends. To the outside world, the Keenes appeared to be the perfect couple, supportive, affectionate, and deeply in sync. But as time passed, small fissures began to appear in their relationship. Paula's career in marketing took off, bringing with it late nights at the office and frequent business trips. Andrew, content with his position as a high school teacher, struggled to understand his wife's drive for professional success. He began to feel left behind, his world shrinking as Paula's expanded. Their conversations, once flowing freely, became stilted and superficial. Paula found herself frustrated by Andrew's reluctance to try new experiences or socialize outside their established routines. Andrew, in turn, felt increasingly inadequate in the face of Paula's vibrant social life and career achievements. Attempts to rekindle their connection often fell flat. A romantic getaway to the Oregon coast ended in tense silence as they realized how little they now had in common. Date nights became an exercise in checking boxes rather than genuinely connecting. Even their physical intimacy waned, with both making excuses to avoid the awkwardness of forced passion. It was in this fragile state that Paula Keene first crossed paths with David Reeves, setting in motion a chain of events that would shatter the delicate equilibrium of their marriage and lead to consequences neither could have imagined. The seeds of Paula and David's affair were planted on a rainy Tuesday afternoon at the Pinewood Business Association mixer. Paula, representing her marketing firm, found herself drawn to the charismatic newcomer who spoke passionately about revitalizing the town's visual branding. David's enthusiasm was infectious, and Paula soon realized an hour had passed in what felt like minutes. Over the following weeks, their paths continued to cross professionally. Paula's firm hired David for a series of projects, necessitating frequent meetings and collaboration. What began as a working relationship quickly evolved into a friendship, with shared lunches extending well beyond the allotted hour as they discovered a mutual love for contemporary art and obscure indie films. Paula found herself looking forward to their interactions, feeling a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. David's attentiveness and genuine interest in her thoughts made her feel seen in a way she had long forgotten. For his part, David was captivated by Paula's quick wit and the passion that shone through when she spoke about her work. The line between professional and personal blurred one evening after a particularly successful presentation to a client. Flush with victory, Paula and David decided to celebrate with drinks at a bar on the outskirts of town. As the night wore on and inhibitions lowered, their conversation turned more intimate. David's hand brushed against Paula's, lingering a moment too long to be accidental. It was Paula who made the first move, leaning in to kiss David as they stood in the parking lot. The kiss, fueled by alcohol and long-suppressed desire, quickly deepened. Their first clandestine rendezvous took place at a small bed and breakfast in the next town over. As they fell into each other's arms, all thoughts of consequences faded away. In the afterglow, tangled in rumpled sheets, Paula and David convinced themselves that what they had found was too precious to give up. And so began a careful dance of stolen moments and secret meetings, each rendezvous adding another layer to the web of deceit that would ultimately ensnare them all. For months, Andrew Keene remained blissfully unaware of his wife's infidelity. He attributed Paula's improved mood and renewed energy to a positive shift in her work life. However, as winter gave way to spring, small inconsistencies began to gnaw at the edges of his consciousness. It started with little things: Paula's sudden interest in obscure bands she'd never mentioned before, hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended when he entered the room, and an inexplicable nervousness whenever plans changed unexpectedly. Andrew initially dismissed these observations, not wanting to acknowledge the growing unease in the pit of his stomach. The pivotal moment came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Paula had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, and as Andrew reached past it to grab a mug, a notification flashed across the screen. The message preview from an unsaved number read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Last time was..." Andrew's hand froze mid-air. He knew he shouldn't look, that doing so would violate Paula's privacy. But the seed of suspicion, once planted, grew rapidly. With trembling fingers, he opened the message thread. What he found confirmed his worst fears: months of intimate exchanges, thinly veiled references to secret meetings, and declarations of passion scrolled before his eyes. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when he saw a photo David had sent. Nauseated and shaking, Andrew closed the laptop and retreated to the basement, his mind reeling. When Paula returned home that evening, she found him sitting in the dark, his eyes red-rimmed and distant. The confrontation that followed was brutal in its rawness. Paula, caught off guard, initially tried to deny everything, but faced with the evidence Andrew had discovered, she finally broke down and confessed to the affair. As Paula sobbed and attempted to explain, Andrew listened in stony silence. When she finished, he stood up and walked out of the room without a word, leaving Paula alone with the wreckage of their marriage strewn around her. In the days following his devastating discovery, Andrew Keene surprised everyone with his apparent, calm acceptance of the situation. When Paula, racked with guilt, offered to move out, Andrew insisted she stay. He spoke of forgiveness, of working through their issues together, and of his enduring love for her despite her transgression. Paula, overwhelmed with relief at this unexpected reprieve, threw herself into rebuilding their relationship. She ended things with David in a terse phone call, blocking his number and social media accounts. She suggested couples therapy, date nights, and even a second honeymoon to rekindle their connection. To their friends and colleagues, the Keenes presented a united front. They were seen holding hands at the farmers' market, laughing together at local events, and Andrew even surprised Paula with flowers at her office. Many in Pinewood commented on how the couple seemed stronger than ever, admiring their ability to weather such a storm. But beneath this carefully constructed facade, a very different reality was unfolding. Andrew's forgiveness was a masterful performance, concealing a heart twisted by betrayal and a mind consumed by thoughts of revenge. Each gentle word and loving gesture was calculated, designed to lull Paula into a false sense of security while he grappled with his growing obsession. Late at night, while Paula slept, Andrew would lie awake, his mind replaying imagined scenes of his wife in David's arms. He began keeping a journal, filling pages with dark musings and elaborate fantasies of confronting his wife's lover. The act of writing these thoughts became a pressure valve, allowing him to maintain his cool exterior. While his inner turmoil intensified, Paula, eager to believe in their reconciliation, overlooked the subtle signs of Andrew's internal struggle. As weeks turned into months, the charade became second nature to Andrew. He played the role of the forgiving husband with chilling precision, all while his resentment festered and grew. He began to view his performance as a cosmic joke, taking a perverse pleasure in how easily everyone, especially Paula, bought into the illusion. As summer faded into autumn, Andrew Keene's carefully maintained facade began to crack under the weight of his growing obsession. At school, Andrew found himself unable to focus on his lessons, his mind constantly wandering to thoughts of Paula and David together. He snapped at students for minor infractions, his usual patience evaporating like morning dew. Colleagues noticed the change, whispering concerns about his erratic behavior in the teacher's lounge. As his jealousy deepened, Andrew's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He installed a hidden GPS tracker on Paula's car, justifying the invasion of privacy as necessary to ease his fears. Late at night, he would pore over her location data, constructing elaborate scenarios to explain any deviation from her usual routes. Andrew's once diverse interests narrowed to a singular focus: monitoring Paula and, by extension, David. He created fake social media accounts to follow David online, scrutinizing every post and interaction for any hint of continued contact with Paula. Hours were spent driving past David's apartment and office, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything to confirm his suspicions. The turning point came on an October evening. Andrew, having convinced himself that Paula was meeting David after work, followed her to a small art gallery downtown. As he watched from across the street, he saw Paula emerge from the gallery, laughing and chatting with a group of colleagues. There was no sign of David. In that moment, something inside Andrew snapped. The realization that his suspicions were unfounded did nothing to quell the rage and humiliation that had been building for months. Sitting in his car watching Paula drive away, Andrew made a decision. If reality wouldn't conform to his suspicions, he would force it to do so. He would create a situation that would justify his jealousy, his anger, and ultimately, the retribution he now craved. The location was his first major decision. Andrew knew the crime scene needed to be isolated enough to avoid witnesses, but not so remote as to arouse suspicion. After careful consideration, he settled on an abandoned lumber mill on the outskirts of town. The dilapidated building, slated for demolition in the coming year, offered both privacy and multiple access points. Next came the question of method. Andrew wanted something that would be difficult to trace back to him, ruling out firearms or any weapon he would need to purchase. After much deliberation, he decided on a garrote, silent, effective, and easily made from household materials. Piece by piece, Andrew accumulated the necessary supplies. He bought lengths of wire from different hardware stores across the county, paying cash each time. Gloves, bleach, and other cleaning supplies were added to regular shopping trips in small quantities to avoid arousing suspicion. He crafted a fake email account under the guise of a local arts organization. He composed a message to David, inviting him to participate in a secretive art installation project at the mill. The email emphasized the need for discretion, explaining that the project was meant to be a surprise for the community. Andrew knew that David's ego and artistic ambitions would make such an offer irresistible. As he waited for David to take the bait, Andrew fine-tuned the details of his plan. He meticulously cleaned his car, removing any traces of hair or fibers that could later implicate him. He purchased a burner phone with cash from a convenience store 2 towns over, using it to communicate with David under the guise of the arts organization coordinator. The night before the planned meeting, Andrew made a final visit to the lumber mill. He cleared a path through the debris, ensuring he would have a clean line of sight from his hiding spot to the entrance. With gloved hands, he positioned the garrote wire behind a stack of rotting pallets, ready to be grabbed at a moment's notice. As he stood in the musty darkness of the mill, the reality of what he was about to do finally hit Andrew. With grim determination, Andrew left the mill and drove home, knowing that the next time he returned it would be to commit murder. Andrew Keene went through the motions of his morning routine, kissing Paula goodbye with a casualness that belied the turmoil roiling within him. He taught his classes on autopilot, his mind fixated on the events to come. As the final bell rang, Andrew hurried to his car, his heart pounding. He drove to the lumber mill, taking a circuitous route to avoid being seen. Parking a quarter-mile away, he donned a pair of nondescript boots he'd purchased for the occasion and made his way to the mill on foot. Inside the dilapidated structure, Andrew positioned himself behind the stack of pallets, the garrote wire coiled in his gloved hands. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, each sound from outside sending a jolt of adrenaline through his body. At precisely 4:30 p.m., the crunch of tires on gravel announced David's arrival. Andrew held his breath as footsteps approached, echoing in the cavernous space. David's voice called out tentatively, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Andrew remained perfectly still, watching as David moved further into the mill. When David's back was turned, Andrew emerged from his hiding spot, wire at the ready. In 3 quick strides, he was behind David. Before David could fully register the presence behind him, Andrew looped the wire around his throat and pulled tight. David's hands flew up, clawing desperately at the wire cutting into his neck. He thrashed violently, his elbow catching Andrew in the ribs with surprising force. The struggle seemed to last an eternity. Andrew's arms burned with the effort of maintaining his grip as David fought for his life. Gradually, David's movements became weaker, his gasps for air more sporadic. With one final convulsive shudder, David Reeves went limp in Andrew's arms. Andrew held on for several minutes more, ensuring that no life remained in his rival's body. When he finally released his grip, David crumpled to the floor like a marionette with cut strings. Panting heavily, Andrew stared down at the lifeless form before him. The reality of what he had done crashed over him in waves. He had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing had prepared him for the stark finality of taking a human life. Moving as if in a trance, Andrew began the process of cleaning up the scene. He collected stray fibers from David's clothing, pocketing them to dispose of later. Using bleach he had stashed earlier, he meticulously cleaned any surfaces he or David might have touched. As the light outside began to fade, Andrew dragged David's body to a pre-dug hole in the far corner of the mill. He covered the shallow grave with debris, knowing that the impending demolition would further conceal his crime. Before leaving, Andrew took one last look around the mill with a mix of horror and grim satisfaction. Andrew realized that he had done it. He had committed the perfect murder. Driving home, Andrew found Paula already there, preparing dinner. He forced himself to act normally, commenting on the meal and asking about her day with casualness. Over the next few days, Andrew was hyper-aware of every news report and passing police car. He scoured local news websites for any mention of David's disappearance, but found nothing. The lack of immediate alarm was both a relief and a new source of anxiety. Paula, oblivious to the turmoil beneath her husband's calm exterior, commented on how much more relaxed Andrew seemed lately. She attributed it to their efforts at reconciliation, never suspecting the dark truth behind his changed demeanor. A week after the murder, the first signs of concern about David's whereabouts began to surface. His clients reported missed deadlines and unanswered calls. Friends posted on social media, asking if anyone had heard from him. Andrew watched these developments with a mixture of dread and perverse fascination. When the police finally became involved, Andrew was ready. He had prepared a detailed account of his movements on the day of David's disappearance, complete with fabricated receipts and a meticulously edited digital trail. He even mentioned to Paula in earshot of a neighbor that he hoped that nice graphic designer was okay, establishing an alibi of concern. As the investigation gained momentum, Andrew found himself drawn into the search efforts. He volunteered to help distribute flyers and even organized a search party to comb areas of Pinewood Park. His apparent dedication to finding David threw off any suspicion that might have fallen on him. But beneath his helpful exterior, Andrew was constantly on edge. Every unexpected knock at the door sent his heart racing. He began to have vivid nightmares of David's final moments, waking up drenched in sweat. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, a constant, invisible burden that he knew he would carry for the rest of his life. As days turned into weeks with no sign of David Reeves, the Pinewood Police Department intensified its investigation. Detective Laura Stewart, a recent transfer from Portland with a reputation for solving cold cases, was assigned to lead the inquiry. Stewart's first step was to retrace David's last known movements. Interviews with his clients and friends painted a picture of a man who had been excited about an upcoming art project, though details were frustratingly vague. Stewart's interest was piqued by mentions of a secretive installation at an undisclosed location. The detective's scrutiny soon turned to David's personal life. It didn't take long for rumors of his affair with Paula Keene to surface. Stewart approached the subject delicately in her interview with Paula, who admitted to the past indiscretion but insisted it had ended months ago. Andrew, present for the interview, played the part of the supportive husband perfectly, expressing sympathy for David's disappearance despite the history. As Stewart dug deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. David's bank records showed no unusual activity, and his passport remained in his apartment. His car was found parked at his residence, ruling out the possibility that he had simply left town. The more Stewart investigated, the more convinced she became that David had met with foul play. A breakthrough came when a hiker reported finding David's phone in Pinewood Park, miles from his usual haunts. Forensic analysis revealed that the phone had been wiped clean of data, an act that struck Stewart as deliberate and suspicious. With each new piece of evidence, the circle of suspects narrowed. Stewart found herself returning again and again to the Keenes. Paula's affair provided a motive, but her genuine distress seemed authentic. Andrew's alibi was solid, yet something about his too perfect responses nagged at Stewart's instincts. As autumn deepened into winter, the case consumed Detective Stewart. She spent long nights poring over evidence, convinced that the key to unraveling the mystery lay somewhere in the complex web of relationships surrounding David Reeves. Little did she know, the truth was far closer and far more chilling than she could have imagined. The turning point in the investigation came on a frigid December morning, 3 months after David Reeves's disappearance. A team of surveyors, assessing the old lumber mill for demolition, made a grisly discovery. Partially unearthed by recent heavy rains, David's decomposing body was found in a shallow grave. Detective Stewart and her team descended on the scene, meticulously combing the area for evidence. Despite Andrew's careful cleanup, trace evidence remained. Fibers matched to David's clothing were found embedded in the floorboards, and DNA analysis of the soil revealed blood spatter consistent with a violent struggle. The discovery of the body shifted the investigation into high gear. Stewart re-interviewed everyone connected to David, this time with a sharper focus. It was during her second conversation with Andrew Keene that things began to unravel. Stewart noticed subtle inconsistencies in Andrew's story, minor details that didn't quite align with his previous statements. His demeanor, once calmly cooperative, now had an undercurrent of nervousness. When Stewart casually mentioned that they had surveillance footage from near the lumber mill, she saw a flicker of panic cross Andrew's face before he quickly composed himself. That momentary lapse was all Stewart needed. She intensified her questioning, probing deeper into Andrew's alibi for the day of David's disappearance. Under the relentless pressure, Andrew's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. In a dramatic turn, Andrew broke down and confessed to the murder. He recounted the entire sordid tale, his discovery of the affair, his months of secret planning, and the final fatal confrontation at the lumber mill. As he spoke, it was as if a dam had burst, years of pent-up emotion pouring out in a torrent of words. Paula, brought in for questioning separately, was shattered by the revelation. She struggled to reconcile the loving, forgiving husband she thought she knew with the man capable of such a calculated act of violence. Her world, already fragile from the strain of the affair and its aftermath, collapsed entirely. As news of Andrew's confession spread, the town of Pinewood reeled in shock. The image of the Keenes as the perfect couple, even in the face of adversity, was shattered. Friends and colleagues struggled to understand how they could have missed the signs of Andrew's deteriorating mental state. In the following weeks, more details emerged. His internet search history revealed months of research on undetectable poisons and body disposal methods. The depth of his obsession and the meticulous nature of his planning chilled even the most seasoned detectives. Andrew Keene was charged with first-degree murder. As he awaited trial, psychologists debated whether his actions were the result of temporary insanity or a more deep-seated pathology. Paula, grappling with her own guilt and the traumatic loss of both her lover and her husband, retreated from public life. The case of David Reeves's murder would long be remembered in Pinewood as a tragic reminder that even in the most seemingly idyllic settings, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface. It served as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of jealousy and the unforeseen consequences of betrayal, forever changing the way the town viewed itself and its inhabitants. Emily Parker was born and raised in the quiet town of Maplewood, Ohio. Her parents, Richard and Ann Parker, were well-respected members of the community. Richard owned a local hardware store, while Ann was a nurse at the nearby hospital. Emily, the middle child with an older brother, Jack, and a younger sister, Sarah, was the apple of her parents' eyes. From an early age, Emily exhibited a zest for life. She was an exceptional student, excelling in her studies and participating in various extracurricular activities. Her passion for teaching emerged during her high school years, inspired by a history teacher who brought the past to life in vivid detail. Emily pursued her dream by attending Ohio State University, where she earned her degree in education. After college, Emily returned to Maplewood and secured a teaching position at the local elementary school. Her dedication to her students was unparalleled. She often stayed late to help with after-school programs and tutored struggling students on weekends. Her colleagues admired her enthusiasm, and parents often requested her for their children's classes. Outside of her professional life, Emily had a wide range of interests. She loved hiking, photography, and reading historical novels. Her weekends were often spent exploring nature trails or curled up with a good book. Friends described her as warm, compassionate, and always ready to lend a helping hand. Emily met David Reynolds at a friend's wedding. He was charming, with a quick wit and an easy smile. David, a financial consultant from New York City, was visiting for the wedding. The attraction was immediate, and their whirlwind romance took everyone by surprise. David lavished Emily with attention, expensive gifts, and exotic trips. Their courtship was brief but intense, and within a year David proposed. Emily, swept off her feet by his charisma and the promise of a glamorous life, said yes. Her family and friends had mixed feelings about the rapid engagement. While they wanted to support Emily's happiness, they couldn't shake a sense of unease about David. He was always impeccably dressed, driving luxury cars and staying in upscale hotels, but his extravagant lifestyle seemed at odds with his modest background. Emily, however, was enamored and reassured everyone that David was her soulmate. Their wedding was a grand affair, held in a picturesque vineyard and attended by over 200 guests. Emily's friends from Maplewood and David's associates from New York mingled under fairy lights and sipped champagne, celebrating the union. As the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon in St. Lucia, no one could have predicted the dark turn their love story would take. David Reynolds was born and raised in Queens, New York. His parents, Thomas and Margaret Reynolds, struggled to make ends meet. Thomas worked as a mechanic, while Margaret held various part-time jobs to support their 3 children. David, the eldest, grew up with a strong drive to escape the financial hardships of his upbringing. From a young age, David exhibited a knack for numbers and a shrewd understanding of money. He excelled in school, earning a scholarship to New York University where he studied finance. David's ambition was evident. He spent his college years networking and securing internships at prestigious firms. His relentless work ethic paid off, and upon graduation, he landed a coveted position at a top financial consultancy. David quickly rose through the ranks, his talent for investment strategies and financial planning earning him a reputation as a rising star. His success afforded him a lifestyle he had always dreamed of: designer suits, high-end cars, and a luxury apartment in Manhattan. However, his professional success masked deeper issues. Colleagues often described David as charming but ruthless, willing to bend the rules to achieve his goals. David's personal life was equally complex. His charm attracted many women, but his relationships were often short-lived. He had a series of high-profile romances, each ending abruptly amid rumors of infidelity and deceit. Despite this, he maintained a polished public image, carefully curating his social media to portray a life of sophistication and success. When David met Emily Parker, she represented something different. Her genuine warmth and small-town innocence were a stark contrast to the superficial relationships he was accustomed to. To his friends, it seemed like David was truly in love for the first time. But as their relationship progressed, cracks began to appear. David's financial empire was not as solid as it seemed. Behind the scenes, he was entangled in risky investments and mounting debts. David's financial troubles were compounded by his extravagant spending habits. He kept these issues hidden from Emily, presenting only the image of a successful and devoted partner. His decision to propose was as much about securing a future with Emily as it was about seeking stability amid his growing financial chaos. Their wedding, though a joyous occasion, also marked the point where David's deceptions began to catch up with him. St. Lucia, with its lush landscapes and serene beaches, was the perfect backdrop for David and Emily's honeymoon. They stayed at an exclusive resort, their bungalow perched on the edge of a secluded cove. The first few days were filled with romantic dinners, sunset walks, and excursions to explore the island's natural beauty. Emily documented their adventures on social media, her posts filled with joy and excitement. On the night of Emily's disappearance, the couple dined at the resort's beachfront restaurant. The atmosphere was idyllic. Soft music played in the background, and tiki torches flickered in the gentle breeze. Fellow diners noticed the couple laughing and holding hands, seemingly in love. The staff, accustomed to honeymooners, paid them little special attention. After dinner, David suggested a moonlit walk along the beach. Emily, always one for romance, readily agreed. They strolled along the water's edge, the sound of the waves mingling with their conversation. David later recounted that Emily had expressed a desire to take a swim. She slipped off her sandals and waded into the water, the moonlight casting a silver glow on her figure. According to David, he returned to their bungalow to fetch a jacket for Emily. When he came back, she was gone. Panic set in as he searched the beach, calling her name. He alerted the resort staff, who joined the search, but Emily was nowhere to be found. David's distress seemed genuine as he spoke with the resort's manager, his voice cracking and hands trembling. The following morning, the local police were notified. They began an immediate investigation, questioning resort staff and guests. Divers searched the waters near the beach, and sniffer dogs were brought in to track any scent that might lead to Emily. Despite their efforts, no clues emerged. The beach was combed for any personal items, but nothing was found. As the hours turned into days, David's behavior began to attract scrutiny. He appeared genuinely distraught, but there were moments when his composure seemed forced. The police noted his meticulous recounting of events, almost as if rehearsed. Resort staff mentioned his insistence on calling his lawyer soon after Emily's disappearance, which struck them as odd. Witnesses provided conflicting accounts. Some recalled seeing the couple arguing earlier in the day, while others described them as affectionate. A few guests reported hearing raised voices from their bungalow the night before Emily vanished. The police were left with a puzzling mix of evidence and testimonies that painted an inconsistent picture of the couple's final hours together. As the investigation stalled, David's narrative was the only story available. His plea for information was broadcast on news networks, his tearful face becoming the public image of a grieving husband. Yet behind the scenes, Detective Hayes was piecing together a different story, one that hinted at a more sinister truth. Detective Hayes arrived at the resort, greeted by the tropical heat and the sight of tourists enjoying their vacations, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding. His first step was to interview David Reynolds. Sitting across from him in the resort's lounge, Hayes observed David's demeanor carefully. The man seemed genuinely distraught, but there was an underlying tension that the seasoned detective couldn't ignore. David recounted the events of the night Emily disappeared, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a flicker of anxiety. Hayes listened intently, asking pointed questions about their activities, their relationship, and any possible reasons Emily might have had to leave suddenly. David's answers were consistent, but Hayes felt they were too polished, as if rehearsed. The detective then spoke with the resort staff and other guests. The accounts varied, some aligning with David's story while others contradicted it. A waitress at the restaurant mentioned that David seemed agitated during dinner, frequently checking his phone. A couple staying in a neighboring bungalow reported hearing an argument late at night, although they couldn't make out the words. Hayes' team searched the couple's bungalow and the surrounding area. They found Emily's belongings neatly packed, her passport and wallet untouched. Her phone was missing, presumably with her. A thorough examination of the beach yielded no new clues. The tide and weather had likely washed away any trace evidence. As the days passed, the investigation broadened. Hayes looked into David's background, finding a man who was both successful and secretive. His financial records revealed a troubling pattern. Despite his high-paying job, David was deep in debt. Large withdrawals from his accounts suggested a gambling problem, and several investments had failed spectacularly. Hayes interviewed David's colleagues and friends in New York, uncovering a different side of him. They described David as charming but unreliable, with a penchant for risky ventures and a history of romantic entanglements. One colleague, who requested anonymity, mentioned that David had recently been involved in a scandal at work, hinting at financial misconduct. The detectives' team also analyzed phone records and bank statements, uncovering a web of transactions that pointed to financial distress. Several large transfers had been made to offshore accounts, and David had taken out substantial loans shortly before the wedding. These findings suggested that David was far from the affluent figure he portrayed. As suspicion around David grew, the investigation took a dramatic turn with the discovery of a letter in Emily's handwriting, found hidden in her suitcase. It was addressed to her parents and hinted at her growing unease about David. She wrote about discovering discrepancies in his stories and financial dealings, expressing fear that she had made a terrible mistake in marrying him. The evidence was mounting, and Detective Hayes felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. But without Emily, the case remained frustratingly incomplete. The detective was determined to uncover the truth, knowing that the facade of the perfect honeymoon was hiding something far more sinister. The financial investigation into David Reynolds' affairs revealed a cascade of deceit. Detective Hayes and his team uncovered a complex network of bank accounts, hidden assets, and dubious transactions. David's financial empire, once thought to be thriving, was crumbling under the weight of risky investments and substantial debts. As Hayes delved deeper, he discovered that David had been involved in several questionable business ventures. One such venture was a failed real estate development in Florida, which had resulted in significant losses for investors. Another was a tech startup that went bankrupt, leaving David with substantial debts. These ventures, combined with his gambling habits, had drained his resources and left him in a precarious financial position. David's secret debts and business failures provided a possible motive for foul play. With Emily's disappearance, questions arose about potential life insurance policies or other financial benefits he might gain. Hayes' team found that David had recently taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Emily, raising further suspicions. Testimonies from friends and colleagues about David's character began to form a consistent narrative. They described him as someone who would do anything to maintain his image of success, even if it meant deceiving those closest to him. Emily, it seemed, had been drawn into a web of lies and financial manipulation. The mounting evidence suggested that David's involvement in Emily's disappearance was more than just circumstantial. His financial desperation, coupled with the inconsistencies in his story, pointed to a more sinister motive. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes knew that the key to solving the case lay in uncovering the full extent of David's deceit and the secrets he had worked so hard to conceal. As the investigation deepened, another layer of David Reynolds' double life began to unfold. His extramarital affairs. Detectives uncovered a series of clandestine relationships that painted a picture of a man far different from the devoted husband he appeared to be. David's phone records and emails revealed communications with several women, some of whom he had met through his business dealings, while others were casual encounters. These relationships ranged from fleeting flings to more serious entanglements. Detective Hayes and his team meticulously tracked down and interviewed these women, each conversation revealing more about David's deceptive nature. One of the women, Laura Mitchell, a marketing executive from New York, provided crucial insight. She described her relationship with David as passionate but tumultuous. They had met at a conference a year before his wedding, and their affair continued well into his engagement with Emily. Laura was unaware of David's upcoming marriage until she saw the wedding announcement on social media. Feeling betrayed, she ended their relationship but kept records of their communications, which she willingly shared with the investigators. Another woman, Jessica Evans, a real estate agent from Miami, had a similar story. She and David had met during one of his business trips, and their affair was marked by lavish gifts and extravagant promises. Jessica, too, was in the dark about David's marital status. She described him as attentive and affectionate, but noted his tendency to vanish for days without explanation. The most damning testimony came from Rachel Turner, a colleague from his firm who had been involved with David for nearly 2 years. Rachel's account revealed a pattern of manipulation and deceit. She recounted how David had confided in her about his financial troubles, painting himself as a victim of unfortunate circumstances. Rachel, deeply infatuated with him, had even loaned him money on several occasions, believing his promises to repay her once his investments paid off. These revelations had a profound impact on the case. They not only established a pattern of deceit, but also suggested potential motives for Emily's disappearance. David's affairs indicated a man capable of maintaining multiple lives, each carefully compartmentalized to prevent discovery. His ability to juggle these relationships while hiding his financial troubles from Emily spoke to his skill at deception. Interviews with his past lovers painted a picture of a man driven by a need for validation and material success. They described how David would often speak of his ambitions and dreams, using his charm to elicit sympathy and support. His relationships, both romantic and financial, were tools he used to navigate his increasingly precarious life. The impact of these revelations on the case was significant. They provided a motive for foul play, suggesting that David might have seen Emily as both an obstacle and a solution to his problems. With his financial empire collapsing and his web of lies unraveling, The pressure on David had reached a breaking point. Emily's disappearance, and the subsequent focus on David, threatened to expose his entire charade. As Detective Hayes pieced together the evidence, it became clear that the investigation was far from straightforward. Each new discovery added complexity to the case, revealing the depths of David's deceit and the lengths he was willing to go to maintain his facade. The true challenge lay in proving his involvement beyond doubt, a task that required uncovering every hidden aspect of his life. Just when Detective Hayes believed he had a clear picture of David Reynolds' involvement in Emily's disappearance, a shocking twist emerged. A mysterious figure, previously unknown to the investigation, came forward with information that turned the case on its head. The figure was a man named Alex Carter, a private investigator from New York. Alex contacted Detective Hayes, claiming to have crucial information about David Reynolds and his activities. Intrigued and cautious, Hayes arranged a meeting. In a dimly lit cafe, Alex revealed his connection to the case. Alex explained that he had been hired by an anonymous client to investigate David Reynolds months before Emily's disappearance. His client had suspected David of financial misconduct and infidelity, and Alex's investigation had uncovered significant evidence of both. He had been tracking David's movements and communications, documenting his secret affairs and shady business dealings. But Alex's most startling revelation was about Emily. According to his findings, Emily had discovered David's infidelity and financial troubles shortly before their wedding. She had confided in a close friend, expressing her doubts and fears about marrying David. This friend, concerned for Emily's safety, had anonymously hired Alex to gather evidence, hoping to give Emily a way out of her situation. Alex provided Detective Hayes with a dossier of his findings, including photographs, financial records, and transcripts of conversations. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a recording of a conversation between David and an unknown associate discussing plans that hinted at foul play. The recording suggested that David had been plotting something sinister, although the details were vague. This new information complicated the case significantly. It introduced the possibility that Emily might have been aware of David's plans and had taken steps to protect herself. Detective Hayes considered the idea that Emily could have staged her disappearance to escape David's clutches, although the lack of concrete evidence made this theory difficult to prove. Hayes decided to re-interview everyone involved, armed with the new information. He spoke again with Emily's family and friends, uncovering more details about her state of mind before the wedding. Emily's best friend, Lisa, revealed that Emily had been increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to the honeymoon. She had confided in Lisa about her fears and mentioned the anonymous tipster who had warned her about David. David's reaction to the reopened investigation was one of surprise and agitation. He denied any involvement in Emily's disappearance and dismissed the evidence provided by Alex Carter as fabrications. However, his growing frustration and inconsistent statements only added to the suspicion surrounding him. The twist in the case forced Detective Hayes to consider all possibilities. He intensified the search for Emily, exploring the idea that she might have gone into hiding. The investigation expanded to include airports, border crossings, and potential safe houses. The media coverage, once focused solely on David, began to speculate about Emily's fate and her possible role in the unfolding drama. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes faced mounting pressure to solve the case. The new information from Alex Carter provided valuable leads, but it also complicated the narrative, making it harder to distinguish between victim and perpetrator. Hayes knew that the truth lay somewhere within the tangled web of deceit and betrayal, and he was determined to unravel it. The investigation into Emily Parker's disappearance stretched on for months, with Detective Hayes and his team following every lead, no matter how tenuous. The case had become a national obsession, with the media closely monitoring every development. Public opinion was divided. Some believed David Reynolds was guilty of foul play, while others speculated that Emily had staged her own disappearance to escape a troubled marriage. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A hiker in a remote part of St. Lucia discovered a makeshift campsite hidden in the dense jungle. Among the belongings were items that matched the descriptions of Emily's possessions, including a distinctive bracelet she was known to wear. The discovery reignited the investigation, with search teams scouring the area for further clues. Eventually, they found Emily, She was alive but severely dehydrated and disoriented. Emily had indeed staged her disappearance, driven by fear and desperation, after uncovering David's deceit and feeling trapped in the marriage. She had fled into the jungle, intending to disappear entirely, but the harsh conditions had taken a toll on her health. Emily's rescue brought a mix of relief and outrage. While many were glad she was safe, questions about her actions and the trauma she endured dominated the public discourse. Detective Hayes interviewed Emily extensively, piecing together her story. She described the mounting pressure she felt after discovering David's infidelities and financial troubles. The anonymous tip from Alex Carter had been the final straw, prompting her to take drastic action. David Reynolds was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit harm. The evidence provided by Alex Carter, combined with Emily's testimony, built a strong case against him. During the trial, the full extent of David's deceit was laid bare. His financial empire had been a house of cards, supported by lies and illegal activities. The jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The aftermath of the case left lasting scars on everyone involved. Emily returned to Maplewood, where she began the long process of healing with the support of her family and friends. She became an advocate for domestic abuse victims, sharing her story to help others in similar situations. The media's fascination with her life eventually faded, but Emily remained a symbol of resilience and survival. Detective Hayes reflected on the case as one of the most challenging of his career. It had been a journey through layers of deception and human frailty, revealing the dark complexities of love, trust, and betrayal. The resolution, while not entirely satisfying, brought a measure of justice and closure to those affected. In the end, the case of Emily Parker's disappearance was a stark reminder that truth can be stranger than fiction, and that beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives, there can lie a twisted web of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Amanda Everwood, with her chestnut hair and piercing blue eyes, was the epitome of elegance and creativity. Born into a family of artists, her childhood home was filled with the scent of oil paints and the sight of canvases in various stages of completion. Amanda had inherited her mother's talent and her father's determination, quickly making a name for herself as an exceptional landscape artist. Her works were known for their vibrant colors and the way they captured the soul of nature. Richard Everwood, in contrast, came from a lineage of lawyers. The Everwood family was renowned for their legal prowess, with generations serving as judges, attorneys, and legal scholars. Richard was no different. He excelled in law school, graduating top of his class, and quickly climbed the ranks at one of the most prestigious law firms in Belleville. His charm, good looks, and sharp mind made him a formidable attorney and a desirable husband. Amanda and Richard met during their sophomore year of college. It was a classic case of opposites. Attracting Amanda's free-spirited nature complemented Richard's structured and disciplined approach to life. They fell in love quickly, their relationship blossoming amidst late-night study sessions, gallery openings, and summer road trips. After graduating, they married in a lavish ceremony that was the talk of Belleville. They settled into a beautiful Victorian home that Amanda adored. She transformed it into a haven filled with art, music, and love. The house had a large garden where Amanda often painted, drawing inspiration from the vibrant flowers and the changing seasons. Richard, on the other hand, was dedicated to his work, often spending long hours at the office. They had a son, Ethan, who became the center of Amanda's world. Their life seemed perfect, at least on the surface. Amanda's days were filled with painting, volunteering at the local art center, and taking care of Ethan. Richard's career continued to flourish, and he was soon made partner at his firm. They attended glamorous parties and charity events, where they were often the center of attention. However, as the years went by, Amanda noticed subtle changes in Richard. He became more distant, often coming home late and leaving early in the morning. The once warm and affectionate man she married was now cold and preoccupied. Amanda tried to ignore these changes, attributing them to the stress of his demanding job. However, the gnawing suspicion in the back of her mind grew stronger with each passing day. Carla Monroe entered their lives when Richard hired her as his personal secretary. Carla was stunning, With her dark, cascading hair, sharp features, and an aura of confidence that turned heads wherever she went, she was efficient, intelligent, and seemed to understand Richard in a way that Amanda no longer could. It wasn't long before Amanda's suspicions turned towards Carla. One evening, Amanda decided to confront Richard. She prepared a candlelit dinner, hoping to reignite the spark in their relationship and to get him to open up. As they sat across from each other at the dining table, Amanda poured her heart out, expressing her concerns and fears. Richard listened, but dismissed her worries, attributing his behavior to the pressures of his job. He assured her that there was nothing to worry about, but Amanda wasn't convinced. Determined to uncover the truth, Amanda hired a private investigator named Mark Collins. Mark was a seasoned professional with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. Over the next few weeks, he followed Richard and Carla, documenting their interactions. The evidence he gathered was damning. Late-night dinners, weekends away, and intimate encounters that left no room for doubt. Richard was having an affair with Carla. Amanda felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a deep sadness. She couldn't understand how Richard could do this to their family. But amidst her turmoil, she also felt a strange sense of relief. At least now she knew the truth, and she could decide what to do next. Armed with the evidence, Amanda's initial devastation gave way to a steely resolve. She decided to confront Carla first, hoping to gather more information before dealing with Richard. Amanda arranged a meeting under the pretense of discussing a charity event that Richard's firm was sponsoring. Carla, unaware of Amanda's true intentions, agreed to meet at a chic downtown cafe. The cafe was a cozy, intimate space with soft lighting and plush seating. Amanda arrived early, choosing a secluded corner table where they could talk privately. Carla walked in a few minutes later, exuding confidence and poise. As she approached the table, Amanda felt a mixture of anger and curiosity. Carla greeted Amanda warmly and commented on how beautiful the cafe was. Amanda, hiding her true feelings, replied politely and steered the conversation towards Richard. She mentioned how Richard had been spending a lot of time at the office and asked how he was handling the workload. Carla responded that Richard was incredibly dedicated and that the cases he was working on required a lot of his time and attention. Amanda then leaned in and, in a low voice, told Carla that she knew about the affair. Carla's face paled, and she opened her mouth to speak, but Amanda stopped her, saying she wasn't there to accuse or blame her. Amanda just wanted to understand why it happened. Carla, with tears in her eyes, explained that it started a few years ago when Richard was going through a rough patch at work. They began spending more time together, and one thing led to another. As Carla spoke, Amanda felt a strange sense of empathy. She could see the pain in Carla's eyes, a reflection of her own turmoil. By the end of the conversation, they had formed an unexpected connection. Amanda was captivated by Carla's intelligence and charisma, while Carla found solace in Amanda's understanding and compassion. In the weeks that followed, Amanda and Carla continued to meet in secret. What had started as a confrontation evolved into a complex relationship. Their meetings became more frequent, and their bond deepened. One evening, Carla invited Amanda to her apartment, ostensibly to review some documents related to the charity event. The apartment was a stylish modern space, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city. As they sat on the couch, sipping wine and talking, the tension between them grew palpable. Carla set her glass down and looked into Amanda's eyes, saying that she had developed feelings for her. Amanda's heart raced. She had felt the same way, but had been too afraid to admit it. She confessed that she felt the same way. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, and that night, they crossed the line from emotional connection to physical intimacy. The affair was intense, a whirlwind of stolen moments and secret rendezvous. Amanda felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, but she was also plagued by guilt and fear. They would meet in secluded spots around the city, hidden corners of parks, out-of-the-way cafes, and Carla's apartment, where they felt free from the prying eyes of the world. Their conversations ranged from deep, philosophical discussions to light-hearted banter. They shared their hopes, dreams, and fears, forming a bond that went beyond physical attraction. However, Amanda was acutely aware of the precariousness of their situation. She knew that if Richard found out, the consequences would be dire. Despite this, she couldn't bring herself to end the affair. Carla had become an essential part of her life, filling a void that she hadn't realized existed. Richard's suspicions grew as he noticed Amanda's changed behavior. She was more distant, often lost in thought, and seemed to have a newfound sense of confidence. Richard's paranoia led him to install a hidden camera in Carla's apartment, suspecting that Amanda might have discovered his affair and was plotting against him. When Richard reviewed the footage and saw his wife with Carla, his rage and sense of betrayal reached a boiling point. He felt emasculated and humiliated, convinced that both women had conspired against him. Richard began to meticulously plan his revenge, determined to regain control over his life. One stormy night, Richard invited Amanda to his office under the pretense of wanting to discuss their relationship and find a way forward. Amanda, hopeful for reconciliation, agreed. As she entered Richard's dimly lit office, she was struck by the coldness in his eyes. Richard told Amanda to sit down, his voice devoid of emotion. Amanda took a seat, her heart pounding. She started to speak, but Richard cut her off, slamming a folder of photographs on the desk. He said he knew everything and knew about her and Carla. Amanda's eyes widened in shock as she looked at the incriminating photos. She pleaded with Richard to let her explain, but he was beyond reason. He lunged at Amanda, his hands closing around her throat. Amanda struggled, clawing at his hands, but Richard's grip was unrelenting. Her vision darkened, and within moments she was gone. Richard stood over Amanda's lifeless body, his mind a whirlwind of rage and confusion. He knew he had to act quickly to cover his tracks. He staged the scene to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, ransacking the office and scattering papers everywhere. He then drove to Carla's apartment, his anger boiling over. Carla was startled to see Richard at her door. She asked what he was doing there, her voice trembling. Richard pushed past her, his eyes wild with fury. He accused her of ruining everything and seducing his wife, destroying his family. Carla backed away, fear gripping her heart, and begged Richard to listen to her and understand that it wasn't like that. But Richard was beyond listening. He lunged at Carla, but she managed to evade him, grabbing a heavy vase and smashing it over his head. Richard staggered, momentarily disoriented. Carla seized the opportunity and fled. Running into the night with nothing but the clothes on her back, she ran through the rain-soaked streets, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She had to get as far away from Richard as possible. She knew that if he caught her, he would kill her. Carla reached the outskirts of town and found an old abandoned cabin. She slipped inside, her body trembling with adrenaline and terror. The next morning, Ethan Everwood found himself without a mother and soon without a father. Richard, attempting to cover his tracks, reported Amanda missing and fabricated an alibi for himself. However, the police quickly uncovered inconsistencies in his story. Amanda's body was discovered in Richard's office, and forensic evidence, along with Richard's erratic behavior, pointed to his guilt. He was arrested and later convicted of Amanda's murder, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Carla, meanwhile, had vanished without a trace. Her car was found abandoned at a rest stop, miles away from Belleville. There were rumors that she had fled the country, but no concrete evidence ever emerged. Some speculated she had started a new life under an assumed identity. Carla's disappearance puzzled many. Growing up in a household marked by religious fervor and violence, Carla had endured years of suppression and fear. Fleeing wasn't just an escape, it was a lifeline to freedom. She feared the repercussions of being discovered by her family, knowing all too well the horrors they could unleash upon her, driving her to vanish without a trace, leaving behind a life of oppression for one of uncertain liberty. Ethan, now orphaned, was taken in by Amanda's sister, Lydia, who raised him with love and care. The Everwood home, once filled with laughter and love, stood silent, a stark reminder of the tragic events that had unfolded. Lydia did her best to create a stable environment for Ethan, but the shadow of his parents' tragedy loomed large over his childhood. She often wondered what kind of man Ethan would grow up to be, carrying the weight of such a dark legacy. Carla's escape was not without difficulty. She knew she had to leave Belleville and disappear completely. She had some cash saved up and used it to buy a bus ticket to the nearest big city. From there, she moved from place to place, using different names and taking on various odd jobs to survive. Her once confident and poised demeanor was replaced by constant anxiety and fear of being recognized. Carla found temporary solace in small towns, where she could blend into the background. She dyed her hair, changed her appearance, and avoided making close connections with anyone. Each time she felt someone might recognize her, she moved on. Her life became a series of temporary stays and fleeting moments of peace. She missed Amanda deeply and often dreamed about their time together, the passion they shared and the plans they had made. In a small coastal town far from Belleville, Carla finally found a semblance of stability. She took on a job at a local diner, working long hours and keeping to herself. The town was quiet, and the people were friendly but respectful of her privacy. For the first time in months, Carla began to relax and let her guard down a little. She rented a small, modest apartment and tried to rebuild her life, though the fear of being discovered never entirely left her. Ethan, now a teenager, struggled with the burden of his family's dark history. He was a quiet, introspective boy, often lost in thought. Lydia did her best to provide a loving home, but Ethan couldn't escape the whispers and stares from those who knew about his parents. School was a challenge, with classmates either avoiding him or bullying him for his father's crime. Ethan found solace in books and spent hours at the local library, immersing himself in stories far removed from his reality. Lydia encouraged Ethan to pursue his interests, hoping to provide him with a positive outlet. He developed a passion for writing, pouring his emotions and experiences into his stories. His teachers noticed his talent and encouraged him to pursue a career in literature. Despite the darkness of his past, Ethan found hope in the future he could create for himself. One day, while browsing through old family photo albums, Ethan came across a photograph of his parents during happier times. They looked so in love, so full of life. He wondered how everything had gone so wrong. Determined to understand, Ethan began to dig deeper into his family's history. He read old newspaper articles, interviewed people who had known his parents, and pieced together the story of their lives. Ethan's investigation led him to discover the affair between his father and Carla. He was shocked and saddened by the betrayal, but he also felt a strange connection to Carla. He wondered what had happened to her after that fateful night. His search for answers led him to contact Mark Collins, the private investigator Amanda had hired. Mark, now retired, was hesitant to reopen old wounds but was moved by Ethan's determination. Mark shared with Ethan the details of his investigation, the evidence he had gathered, and the events that had transpired. Ethan learned about the confrontation between his mother and Carla, their subsequent affair, and the night his mother was murdered. Ethan felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a deep need for closure. Determined to find Carla, Ethan followed the trail she had left behind. He visited the places she had stayed, talked to people who had encountered her, and slowly pieced together her journey. The trail eventually led him to the small coastal town where Carla was now living. Carla was working her usual shift at the diner when Ethan walked in. She didn't recognize him at first, but as he approached her, she saw a familiar sadness in his eyes. Ethan introduced himself, explaining that he was Amanda and Richard's son. Carla was stunned and filled with a mixture of fear and hope. She invited Ethan to sit down, and they began to talk. Ethan told Carla about his life, his struggles, and his search for answers. Carla, in turn, shared her story, her escape, and her attempts to rebuild her life. They talked for hours, sharing their pain and their memories of Amanda. Carla revealed how deeply she had loved Amanda, and how the affair had been a source of both joy and torment. Ethan asked Carla about the night his mother was murdered. Carla recounted the events, her voice trembling with emotion. She told him how Richard had confronted her, his rage and violence, and her desperate escape. Ethan listened intently, feeling a mix of anger towards his father and compassion for Carla. Ethan decided to stay in the coastal town for a while, to get to know Carla better, and to find some closure for himself. They spent a lot of time together, talking about Amanda, sharing stories, and helping each other heal. Carla found comfort in Ethan's presence, and Ethan felt a sense of connection and understanding that he had never felt before. As time went on, Ethan and Carla's relationship grew stronger. They became a support system for each other, helping to heal the wounds of the past. Ethan continued to write, inspired by the stories Carla had shared and the strength he saw in her. Carla found a new sense of purpose, helping Ethan and finding a way to move forward with her life. Years passed, and Ethan published his first novel, a fictionalized account of his family's story. The book received critical acclaim, and Ethan was praised for his emotional depth and storytelling ability. He dedicated the book to his mother, Amanda, and to Carla, who had shown him the importance of understanding and forgiveness. Carla, meanwhile, continued to live in the coastal town, finding peace and stability. She stayed in touch with Ethan, visiting him often and watching him grow into a successful writer. She found solace in the fact that she had been able to help Ethan find closure and that they had both found a way to move forward. The Everwood murders became a notorious case in Belleville, a cautionary tale of deceit, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of hidden passions. Amanda's art gained a lot of fame, her landscapes now imbued with a haunting beauty that drew admirers from afar. Richard's name, once respected, became synonymous with tragedy and madness. Years later, the town still whispered about Carla Monroe, the enigmatic secretary who disappeared into the night. Her fate remained one of Belleville's greatest mysteries, a lingering shadow over the tragic tale of the Everwood family. Ethan grew up carrying the weight of his parents' legacy, determined to forge a different path and break free from the cycle of betrayal and violence. In the end, the story of the Everwood murders served as a stark reminder of the fragility of human relationships and the devastating consequences of secrets and lies. It was a tale that would be told for generations, a dark chapter in the history of Belleville that would never be forgotten. Ethan continued to write, his works often exploring themes of love, betrayal, and redemption. His novels resonated with readers, many of whom were unaware of the true story behind his words. Despite the darkness of his past, Ethan found a way to turn his pain into art, creating something beautiful from the ashes of his family's tragedy. In the end, the Everwood murders were more than just a crime. They were a story of love, loss, and the enduring power of forgiveness. The lives of those involved were forever changed, but they found a way to move forward, to find peace, and create something new from the ruins of their past. Born Celeste DuPont in a small Louisiana town, the woman who would become Madame Celeste had a childhood steeped in poverty and superstition. Her mother, Yvette, was a practitioner of voodoo, while her father, Jean-Paul, was a charming con artist who drifted in and out of their lives. From an early age, Celeste learned the art of reading people, picking up on subtle cues and body language that would later serve her well in her chosen profession. As a child, Celeste was often left to her own devices, spending hours exploring the bayou and listening to the stories of local elders. She was particularly drawn to tales of the supernatural, soaking up every bit of folklore and mysticism she could find. It was during this time that she first claimed to have visions, describing vivid dreams that seemed to predict future events. As she entered her teenage years, Celeste's natural beauty and newfound abilities made her the talk of the town. She began to hold seances for her classmates, charging small fees for her services. It was during one of these sessions that she met Thomas, a charismatic drifter who recognized her talent for deception. Together, they embarked on a series of small-time cons across the South, posing as faith healers and fortune-tellers. Their partnership, both romantic and professional, lasted for several years until a scam went wrong. Thomas was arrested, but Celeste managed to evade the authorities. It was then that she decided to reinvent herself, dyeing her hair and adopting the persona of Madame Celeste, the mysterious psychic from Europe. With her new identity, Celeste moved from town to town, honing her craft and building a reputation. She learned to cold read, to manipulate emotions, and to exploit the grief and desperation of her clients. Her cons grew more elaborate, and her fees more exorbitant. It was in Aviara Cove that Madame Celeste set up her most ambitious operation yet. Little did she know that her pursuit of true supernatural power would lead her down a path of no return, culminating in a crime that would shake the foundations of her carefully constructed world. Robert and Elizabeth Morin were the epitome of old money and social grace. Their sprawling estate on the outskirts of Aviara Cove was a testament to generations of wealth accumulated through shrewd investments and inherited fortune. Robert, in his early 60s, had made a name for himself in the world of finance, while Elizabeth was known for her philanthropic efforts and impeccable taste. The Morins had moved to Aviara Cove 5 years ago, seeking a quieter life away from the bustle of New York City. They quickly became pillars of the community, hosting lavish charity galas and contributing generously to local causes. Their fairy tale romance and seemingly perfect life were the envy of many in town. However, beneath the polished exterior lay a web of secrets and unfulfilled desires. Robert, despite his business acumen, harbored a deep-seated fear of losing everything he had worked for. This paranoia led him to make increasingly risky investments, seeking to multiply his wealth to ensure his legacy. Elizabeth, on the other hand, struggled with the loss of her twin sister in a car accident years ago, an event that left her with a profound sense of guilt and a desperate need for closure. It was Elizabeth who first heard of Madame Celeste through the town's gossip mill. Initially skeptical, she found herself drawn to the idea of communicating with her lost sister. Robert, ever the pragmatist, dismissed the notion of psychics and mediums as nonsense, but as he watched his wife sink deeper into melancholy, he reluctantly agreed to accompany her to a session with the renowned psychic. The Morans' decision to seek out Madame Celeste would prove to be fateful. Their wealth, combined with their emotional vulnerabilities, made them the perfect marks for the cunning psychic. As they made there for their first appointment, neither Robert nor Elizabeth could have imagined the dark turn their lives were about to take. They were about to step into a world where their deepest fears and most fervent hopes would be used against them, setting in motion a chain of events that would end in bloodshed and horror. The first meeting between Madame Celeste and the Morans took place on a crisp autumn evening. As the couple entered the dimly lit parlor, they were immediately enveloped by the heady scent of incense and the soft glow of candles. Madame Celeste, resplendent in a deep purple gown adorned with silver stars, greeted them with a knowing smile that seemed to pierce their very souls. Elizabeth, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and trepidation, spoke first. "Madame Celeste, I've heard so much about you and we hope you can help us." The psychic's gaze lingered on Elizabeth, noting the slight tremor in her voice and the way she clutched her husband's arm. Without missing a beat, Madame Celeste responded, "The spirits have been expecting you, my dear. I sense a great loss in your past, a piece of yourself torn away." Elizabeth gasped, her grip on Robert tightening. Robert, meanwhile, remained stoic, his skepticism evident in the tight set of his jaw. Madame Celeste turned her attention to him, her voice taking on a more authoritative tone. "And you, sir, carry the weight of many responsibilities. The future weighs heavily on your mind." Over the next hour, Madame Celeste wove a tapestry of half-truths and educated guesses, expertly reading the couple's reactions and tailoring her revelations to their responses. She spoke of Elizabeth's sister, describing her with just enough accuracy to be convincing, and hinted at messages from beyond the veil. For Robert, she alluded to business opportunities and potential pitfalls, her vague prophecies playing into his financial anxieties. By the end of the session, Elizabeth was in tears, feeling a connection to her lost sister that she hadn't experienced in years. Even Robert, despite his initial skepticism, found himself unsettled by the accuracy of some of Madame Celeste's insights. As they left, both agreed to return for further consultations. Over the next few weeks, the Morans became regular visitors. Madame Celeste carefully cultivated their trust, each session revealing just enough to keep them coming back for more. She began to suggest more elaborate rituals and expensive offerings to enhance their connection to the spirit world. For Elizabeth, these sessions became a lifeline, a way to assuage her guilt and find peace. Robert, while still harboring doubts, couldn't deny the positive change in his wife's demeanor. Slowly but surely, Madame Celeste was weaving her web around the wealthy couple, drawing them deeper into her world of shadows and secrets. Little did the Morans know that with each visit, they were inching closer to a fate far darker than they could have ever imagined. Madame Celeste's demands became more extravagant with each passing day. She insisted on rare crystals and precious metals for energy focus, exotic herbs and incense for purification, and even suggested that the Morans donate significant sums to various charitable causes to curry favor with the spirits. In reality, these donations were funneled into offshore accounts controlled by Celeste herself. The psychic's manipulation extended beyond mere financial exploitation. She began to insinuate herself into every aspect of the Morans' lives. Late-night phone calls became common, with Celeste claiming to have urgent messages from the beyond. She advised Robert on business decisions, conveniently aligning her visions with her own financial interests. For Elizabeth, she became a confidant, slowly isolating her from friends and family under the guise of spiritual protection. As her influence grew, so did Madame Celeste's obsession with the occult. The rituals she performed for the Morans became darker, incorporating elements of blood magic and sacrificial rites. She spoke of ancient powers and forbidden knowledge, her eyes gleaming with a fervor that bordered on madness. The Morans, too deep in her thrall to see the danger, followed her lead without question. Behind closed doors, Celeste pored over arcane texts, convinced that she was on the brink of unlocking true supernatural power. Her sessions with other clients became perfunctory, her focus entirely on the Morans and the potential they represented. In her twisted mind, their wealth and willingness to follow her every command made them the perfect vessels for a grand ritual she was planning. As her plans took shape, Madame Celeste began to lay the groundwork for her ultimate con. She spoke to the Morans of a great awakening that would require them to sever all ties with their old life. Under her guidance, they began to liquidate assets and make preparations to transfer large sums of money. Robert, his business acumen clouded by Celeste's influence, failed to see the red flags that would have been obvious in any other circumstance. Elizabeth, lost in her grief in the promise of eternal connection with her sister, was willing to go to any lengths Madame Celeste suggested. The stage was set for a tragedy of epic proportions. Madame Celeste, her grip on reality slipping with each passing day, had convinced herself that the murder of the Morans would be the key to unlocking limitless power. She meticulously planned every detail, from the ritual site to the method of disposing of the bodies. As the night of the Great Awakening approached, an air of anticipation settled. The Morans, unaware of the fate that awaited them, prepared for what they believed would be a spiritual rebirth. At precisely midnight, the Morans arrived, dressed in the white robes Celeste had provided. Their eyes shone with a mixture of excitement and trepidation as they followed the psychic through the house and into the backyard. Robert clutched a briefcase containing documents for the transfer of their wealth, a necessary step for spiritual unburdening, as Celeste had explained. As they entered the clearing, Elizabeth gasped at the elaborate setup. A large pentagram had been drawn on the ground with what appeared to be ash, surrounded by flickering candles and strange symbols. At its center stood the altar, adorned with crystals, feathers, and a large silver chalice. Madame Celeste began the ritual, her voice rising and falling in a hypnotic chant. The words, a mix of Latin and gibberish, washed over the Morans, lulling them into a trance-like state. As the chanting intensified, Celeste instructed the couple to lie down within the pentagram, their heads toward the altar. With practiced movements, she bound their wrists and ankles with silk cords, explaining that it was to anchor their spirits during the transition. The Morans offered no resistance, their minds clouded by the intoxicating blend of incense and blind faith. As the ritual reached its climax, Madame Celeste's demeanor changed. The mask of the benevolent spiritual guide slipped away, revealing the cold, calculating eyes of a killer. From beneath the altar, she retrieved an ornate dagger, its blade glinting in the moonlight. Elizabeth was the first to realize something was terribly wrong. She began to struggle against her bonds, her voice rising in panic. Robert, shaken from his stupor by his wife's cries, demanded to know what was happening, but it was too late. With swift, brutal efficiency, Madame Celeste plunged the dagger into Elizabeth's chest. The woman's scream was cut short as blood bubbled from her lips. Robert roared in anguish and fury, thrashing wildly against his restraints. Celeste turned to him, her face spattered with his wife's blood, and brought the dagger down again and again. In the ensuing silence, broken only by the gurgling of the dying couple, Madame Celeste began to collect their blood in the silver chalice. Her movements were methodical, almost reverent, as she muttered incantations under her breath. She truly believed that this act of supreme sacrifice would grant her the power she had long sought. As life ebbed from the Morans, Madame Celeste completed her grisly task. She dipped her fingers in the blood-filled chalice and began to draw symbols on her own skin, her eyes wild with a terrible ecstasy. In her madness, she failed to notice the faint sound of sirens in the distance. The ritual concluded. Celeste stood over the bodies of her victims, arms outstretched, waiting for the rush of power she was certain would come. But as the minutes ticked by, all she felt was a growing sense of panic and the cold realization of what she had done. With trembling hands, she began the process of cleaning up the crime scene. She had planned for this, but the reality of disposing of 2 bodies was far more daunting than she had anticipated. As she dragged the corpses towards a pre-dug grave deeper in the woods, Her mind raced with plans to secure the Morans' wealth and flee Aviara Cove. In the pale light of dawn, Madame Celeste surveyed the scene of her gruesome crime. The once pristine clearing was now a tableau of horror, with blood-soaked earth and the lingering stench of death. She had managed to bury the bodies of Robert and Elizabeth Moran in the deep grave she had prepared, but evidence of the murder still littered the area. With a growing sense of panic, Celeste began the painstaking process of erasing all traces of the night's events. She gathered the blood-stained robes, the ritual implements, and the now empty chalice, stuffing them into heavy garbage bags. The pentagram was scuffed out, leaves and branches scattered over the disturbed earth. As she worked, Celeste's mind raced. She needed to establish an alibi, to create a narrative that would explain the Morans' sudden disappearance. Rushing back to the house, she showered, scrubbing away every speck of blood and dirt. She then set about creating a paper trail, forging emails and documents that suggested the couple had been planning a secret getaway. Using the information she had gleaned from her sessions with the Morans, Celeste began the complex process of accessing their accounts. She had coerced them into sharing passwords and account details under the guise of spiritual unburdening. Now, those same details would allow her to siphon off their considerable wealth. As morning turned to afternoon, Celeste made a series of calls. To the Morans' housekeeper, she explained that the couple had left for an emergency business trip. To their few close friends, she expressed concern that she hadn't heard from them since their last session. She even went so far as to call the local police, reporting that the Morans had missed an important appointment and weren't answering their phones. But even as she wove her web of lies, Celeste could feel it all unraveling. The hasty cleanup of the crime scene, the rushed cover-up, it all felt inadequate. She hadn't anticipated the overwhelming guilt and fear that now consumed her. Every car that drove past the house, every unexpected noise made her jump. As evening approached, a knock at the door sent Celeste into a panic. It was Detective Malika Collins, responding to the missing persons report Celeste herself had filed. The psychic invited her in, forcing a calm demeanor as she recounted her concerns about the Morans. Detective Collins listened intently, her keen eyes taking in every detail of Celeste's home and behavior. She asked pointed questions about the couple's last known whereabouts and their relationship with Celeste. Though the psychic maintained her composure, she could sense the detective's suspicion. As Collins left, promising to keep Celeste informed of any developments, the full weight of what she had done came crashing down on the self-proclaimed psychic. She realized that her pursuit of power and wealth had led her down a path from which there was no return. The once confident Madame Celeste was now a woman on the edge, waiting for the inevitable moment when her crimes would be discovered. Detective Malika Collins had been with the Aviara Cove Police Department for 15 years, and something about the Moran disappearance case didn't sit right with her from the start. Her instincts, honed by years on the force, told her that Madame Celeste knew more than she was letting on. In the days following her initial visit, Collins dove deep into the investigation. She interviewed the Morans' friends, colleagues, and household staff. A pattern quickly emerged. In the months leading up to their disappearance, the couple had become increasingly isolated, their behavior erratic and secretive. Collins's attention focused on their connection to Madame Celeste. She discovered that large sums of money had been flowing from the Morans' accounts to various shell companies and offshore banks. When she traced these transactions, she found a complex web of financial maneuvers that all seemed to lead back to the psychic. Intrigued by Celeste's background, Collins began to dig into her past. She uncovered a trail of complaints and suspicions spanning several states, all related to psychic fraud and con artistry. The detective realized she was dealing with a sophisticated criminal, one who had managed to stay one step ahead of the law for years. As Collins delved deeper, she started interviewing Celeste's other clients. Many spoke of the psychic with reverence, but a few shared stories of feeling manipulated and pressured to part with large sums of money. One client, an elderly widow, tearfully recounted how Celeste had tried to convince her to sell her home and invest the proceeds in a spiritual cleansing ritual. The detective's suspicions grew when forensic analysis of the Morans' computer revealed deleted emails discussing a Great Awakening ritual with Madame Celeste. The language used was cryptic, but it was clear that the couple had been planning something significant for the night they vanished. Armed with this information, Collins obtained a warrant to search her property. As her team combed through Celeste's home and the woods behind it, the detective couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of uncovering something terrible. Little did she know that buried deep in those woods lay the gruesome truth of what had really happened to Robert and Elizabeth Moran. The search of Madame Celeste's property yielded a treasure trove of evidence. Hidden in a false bottom of her antique writing desk, detectives discovered a journal detailing her deepening obsession with the occult and her plans for the Morans. The basement revealed a makeshift laboratory where she had been experimenting with various hallucinogenic compounds, likely used to enhance her clients' spiritual experiences. But it was the discovery in the woods that broke the case wide open. A cadaver dog, brought in to search the expansive property, alerted to a spot deep in the forest. As police excavated the area, they unearthed the badly decomposed bodies of Robert and Elizabeth Moran. Detective Collins, watching as the bodies were exhumed, felt a mix of vindication and horror. Her instincts had been right, but the truth was far more gruesome than she had imagined. Forensic analysis would later reveal traces of the ritual, including remnants of candle wax and unfamiliar herbs on the victim's remains. With this damning evidence in hand, Collins moved to arrest Madame Celeste, but the psychic, perhaps foreseeing the net closing around her, had fled. As the search for Celeste continued, Collins pieced together the full extent of her crimes. Financial records showed that she had managed to transfer millions from the Morans' accounts in the days following their murder. Interviews with other clients revealed a pattern of exploitation going back years. The detective also uncovered Celeste's true identity as Celeste Dupont, connecting her to unsolved cases of fraud and theft across multiple states. It became clear that the Moran murders were the culmination of a lifetime of increasingly bold and dangerous cons. Law enforcement tracked Celeste to a remote cabin in the Adirondacks. As police surrounded the property, Celeste attempted to flee into the woods. In a tense standoff, Collins confronted the self-proclaimed psychic, who was now a shell of her former confident self. "Madame Celeste, or Celeste Dupont, your crimes have caught up with you," Collins called out. "There's nowhere left to run." For a moment it seemed Celeste might try to fight or flee, but then, as if all the fight had left her at once, she sank to her knees in the damp forest floor. As Collins approached to make the arrest, Celeste looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of defeat and something else, a lingering madness that sent chills down the detective's spine. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, from financial records showing the systematic draining of the Morans' accounts to the chilling contents of Celeste's personal journals. Forensic experts detailed the brutal nature of the murders, while psychologists attempted to unravel the defendant's complex psyche. Perhaps the most damning testimony came from Thomas, Celeste's former partner. He provided insight into her early cons and the evolution of her tactics, painting a picture of a woman whose greed and delusions of grandeur had spiraled out of control. Celeste's defense team attempted to argue that she was not of sound mind, presenting evidence of her deep-seated belief in the occult and her conviction that the murders were part of a genuine ritual. They portrayed her as a victim of her own delusions, manipulated by the very forces she thought she was channeling. But as the trial progressed, it became clear that Celeste's apparent madness was intertwined with a calculating intelligence. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. The judge, citing the heinous nature of the crimes and Celeste's lack of genuine remorse, sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the quiet town of Riverwood, the Matthews family was well known and well liked. John Matthews, a charismatic businessman, his wife Jane, a dedicated nurse, and Jane's teenage daughter Ava painted a picture of suburban bliss. However, behind closed doors, shadows of deceit and betrayal lurked. One fateful night, Ava was found dead in her bedroom and the town's illusion of peace shattered. Detective David Hunter, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving the toughest cases, was called to the scene. As he surveyed the Matthews home, he could sense the undercurrent of tension. The initial reports pointed towards a domestic dispute gone tragically wrong, but Hunter's instincts told him there was more to this story. Jane was found crumpled on the floor, wailing inconsolably as she clung to her daughter's lifeless body. John's face was a mask of shock and grief, but something about his demeanor struck Hunter as off. In the days that followed, the investigation would unravel a web of lies, betrayal, and ultimately murder. Detective Hunter arrived at the Matthews residence on a chilly autumn evening. The house, a modest two-story home with a well-manicured lawn, stood eerily silent. Inside, the once warm and inviting living room was now a flurry of activity, with uniformed officers and forensic technicians meticulously combing through the scene. Ava's room was at the end of a narrow hallway on the second floor. The door was ajar, and a pool of blood stained the beige carpet just inside the threshold. Ava lay sprawled on her bed, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Her throat had been slashed, a brutal end to a young life filled with promise. Hunter's gaze moved around the room, noting the signs of a struggle. The nightstand was overturned, and a lamp lay shattered on the floor. He turned to the forensic officer. "What have we got?" The officer, a young woman named Carla, responded, "It's a mess. No signs of forced entry, and no murder weapon yet." Looks like she fought back, though. Downstairs, Jane Matthews sat on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. John hovered nearby, his arm around her shoulders. Jane's eyes were hollow, and she clung to John as if he were a lifeline. Hunter approached them, his voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Matthews, can you tell me what happened?" Jane's voice trembled as she spoke. "I came home from work and found her like this. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. How could this happen?" John tightened his grip on her shoulder, his face a mixture of sorrow and anger. "We're going to find out who did this, Jane. I promise." Hunter studied John's face, noting the intensity in his eyes. He turned to his partner, Officer Johnson, who was taking notes nearby. "Get statements from the neighbors. See if anyone saw or heard anything unusual." As the investigation continued into the night, Hunter's mind raced with questions. Who could have wanted Ava dead? Was it a random act of violence or something more personal? The answers would come, but not without unearthing the dark secrets that lay hidden within the Matthews family. The Matthews family had lived in Riverwood for over a decade. John Matthews, a successful entrepreneur, owned a small chain of hardware stores. His business acumen and charm made him a respected figure in the community. Jane, his wife, was a nurse at the local hospital, known for her kindness and dedication. Ava, Jane's daughter from a previous marriage, was a bright and outgoing teenager, excelling in both academics and extracurricular activities. John and Jane's marriage appeared strong from the outside. They were often seen at community events, always together, always smiling. But behind the facade, their relationship was strained. John was often away on business trips, and Jane's demanding job left little time for family. Ava, caught in the middle, struggled with feelings of abandonment and longing for a stable family life. Ava's relationship with John was complicated. She admired his success and charm, but resented his frequent absences and the way he seemed to dominate her mother's attention. Their interactions were often tense, with Ava pushing back against John's authority. Despite this, she confided in her friends that she wished she could have a closer bond with him. Jane's love for Ava was undeniable, but their relationship was not without its challenges. As Ava entered her teenage years, the typical mother-daughter conflicts arose, exacerbated by Jane's long hours at work. Despite their disagreements, Jane was fiercely protective of Ava, always striving to provide her with the best opportunities. The Matthews neighbors, the Carters, were a significant presence in their lives. Lisa Carter, a vibrant woman with a magnetic personality, often visited Jane. The two women had become close friends, bonding over shared interests and the challenges of raising teenagers. Lisa's husband, Mark, a quiet and reserved man, worked as an accountant and kept mostly to himself. Unbeknownst to Jane, John and Lisa's friendship had crossed boundaries. Their affair began innocently enough, with casual conversations and shared drinks. But as John's discontent with his marriage grew, so did his attraction to Lisa. They found solace in each other's company, their clandestine meetings becoming more frequent and more intense. Ava, perceptive and curious, noticed the subtle changes. She saw the stolen glances, the hushed conversations, and the lingering touches. One evening, she followed John to the Carters' house, witnessing the undeniable proof of their affair. Shocked and betrayed, Ava confronted John, demanding he end the affair and tell Jane the truth. John's reaction was swift and violent. Fearful of his secret being exposed, he lashed out at Ava, threatening her to keep quiet. Ava, determined to protect her mother, refused to back down. The tension between them escalated, culminating in the tragic events of that fateful night. The Matthews' seemingly perfect life was built on a foundation of lies and deceit. As Detective Hunter delved deeper into their history, he began to see the cracks in their facade. The truth, he knew, was buried beneath layers of betrayal and anger. It was up to him to uncover it and bring justice to Ava. Detective David Hunter was known for his tenacity and keen instincts. With over 2 decades of experience, he had seen it all, from petty thefts to gruesome homicides. As he stood in the Matthews living room, he felt the familiar rush of determination. This case was personal. He could feel the weight of it bearing down on him. Hunter began his investigation by interviewing the Matthews neighbors. The Carters were first on his list. Lisa Carter, visibly shaken, recounted her interactions with the Matthews, emphasizing her close friendship with Jane. Mark Carter, on the other hand, seemed distant and evasive, his eyes darting around nervously as he spoke. Lisa admitted that she had seen John more often recently, but she attributed it to their shared social circles. Mark, when pressed, mentioned hearing arguments from the Matthews house but couldn't provide specific details. Hunter noted the inconsistencies in their statements, his suspicion growing. Back at the precinct, Hunter and his partner, Officer Johnson, reviewed the evidence collected from the crime scene. The lack of forced entry suggested that Ava knew her attacker. The struggle indicated she fought back, which meant the killer likely bore defensive wounds. Hunter decided to focus on the Matthews family dynamics. He arranged an interview with Jane, hoping to gain more insight into her relationship with Ava and John. Jane, still reeling from the shock, struggled to articulate her thoughts. She described Ava as a loving but headstrong teenager, often clashing with John over trivial matters. "Did you notice any changes in John's behavior recently?" Hunter asked, leaning forward. Jane hesitated, then nodded. He seemed more distant, more stressed. "I thought it was work-related. He was traveling a lot, and we hardly had time together." Hunter's mind raced. The frequent business trips could be a cover for something else. He needed more information about John's activities and interactions outside the family. The next day, Hunter visited John's office. His colleagues painted a picture of a dedicated but increasingly irritable man. They mentioned his frequent absences and whispered about a possible affair, though no one could provide concrete evidence. Hunter's next stop was the local coffee shop, a popular spot for the neighborhood gossip mill. The barista, a young woman with a penchant for eavesdropping, confirmed seeing John with Lisa Carter on multiple occasions. They seemed close, too close for just friends, she said, smirking. As pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Hunter's suspicion of John grew. He needed to find solid proof of the affair and connect it to Ava's murder. He decided to confront John directly, hoping to catch him off guard. John, seated in the interrogation room, maintained his composure. He denied any involvement in Ava's death, insisting that he was as devastated as Jane. Hunter pressed him about the affair, watching for any signs of guilt. John's facade cracked slightly. He admitted to spending time with Lisa, but insisted it was innocent. Hunter wasn't convinced. He could sense that John was hiding something, and he was determined to uncover the truth. As the investigation progressed, Hunter faced mounting pressure to close the case. The community was on edge and the media was relentless, but he knew that rushing to judgment could lead to a miscarriage of justice. He needed to stay focused and methodical, following the evidence wherever it led. Hunter's gut told him that the key to solving the case lay in understanding the true nature of the Matthews family dynamics and the hidden relationships that had turned their lives upside down. He was prepared to dig deep, no matter how uncomfortable the truths he uncovered might be. Jane Matthews sat across from Detective Hunter, her eyes red from days of weeping. She clutched a tissue, twisting it nervously in her hands. The grief and shock of Ava's murder had taken a visible toll on her, but there was a steely determination in her gaze. "Detective Hunter, I need you to understand. I loved my daughter more than anything," she began, her voice trembling. "We had our arguments, yes, but what mother and teenage daughter don't? She was everything to me." Hunter nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Tell me about the night Ava was killed. Where were you and what did you do?" "I was at the hospital, working a double shift. One of the nurses called in sick, and I had to cover for her. I left the house around 6 p.m. and didn't get back until after midnight. When I walked in and found Ava," Jane's voice broke, and she took a moment to compose herself. "Did you notice anything unusual when you came home?" Hunter asked gently. Jane shook her head. "No, everything seemed normal. The door was locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. I went straight to Ava's room to check on her, and that's when I found her." Hunter leaned back, considering her words. Jane's alibi seemed solid, and her genuine grief was evident. But there was still the matter of her relationship with Ava, and the tension that had been brewing in their household. "Jane, I've spoken with some of your neighbors and colleagues. They mentioned that Ava and John didn't always get along. Can you tell me more about that?" Jane sighed, wiping away fresh tears. John tried to be a good stepfather, but Ava resented him. She felt like he was trying to replace her father. They argued often, especially about his long absences and his strict rules. "And what about you and John? How was your relationship?" Hunter probed. "We've had our ups and downs," Jane admitted. "Lately, things have been strained. He was distant, always busy with work. I suspected something was wrong, but I never imagined it would lead to this." As Jane spoke, Hunter noted the raw honesty in her words. She was a mother grieving her child, a wife grappling with the unraveling of her marriage. Despite the initial suspicion, Hunter began to believe that Jane was not involved in Ava's death. But if she wasn't the killer, then who was? The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but there were still gaps. Hunter needed to dig deeper, to uncover the hidden truths that would lead him to Ava's murderer. The answer, he felt, was closer than he had initially thought. As Detective Hunter dug deeper into the Matthews family dynamics, his suspicions about John grew stronger. The rumors of an affair with Lisa Carter had to be verified, and Hunter knew that uncovering this relationship could be the key to solving Ava's murder. Hunter decided to pay another visit to Lisa Carter. She was in her garden, pruning rose bushes when he approached. Her demeanor was calm, but Hunter could see the tension in her eyes. "Lisa, I need to ask you some more questions about your relationship with John Matthews," he began. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she set down the pruning shears. "What do you want to know?" Hunter pressed on. "There have been rumors that you and John were more than just friends. I need to know if there's any truth to that." Lisa's face paled and she looked away, struggling to find her words. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "Yes, it's true. John and we had an affair. It started about a year ago. We were both unhappy in our marriages, and we found comfort in each other." Hunter nodded, noting her admission. "Did Ava know about the affair?" Lisa's eyes widened in shock. "How did you know?" Hunter leaned in, his voice firm. "It's important, Lisa. Did Ava know?" Lisa nodded slowly. "Yes, she found out a few weeks ago. She saw us together and confronted John. She was furious, threatened to tell Jane. John begged her not to, but she wouldn't listen." Hunter felt a chill run down his spine. The pieces were falling into place. What happened after Ava confronted John? Lisa hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. John was frantic. He tried to reason with Ava, but she was adamant. They argued a lot after that. He told me he was scared of what Ava might do, that she could destroy both our families. Hunter thanked Lisa for her honesty and made his way back to the precinct. He reviewed the evidence once more, focusing on John's behavior and movements. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that John had something to do with Ava's murder. Hunter decided it was time to confront John with the new information. He called John into the station for another interview, hoping to catch him off guard. As John sat across from him, Hunter could see the tension in his eyes. "John, I've spoken with Lisa Carter. She confirmed your affair." Hunter began, watching John's reaction closely. John's face tightened, but he remained silent. Hunter continued. "Ava found out about the affair, didn't she? She confronted you and threatened to tell Jane." John's composure cracked. He leaned forward, his voice shaking. "Yes, she found out, but I didn't kill her. I loved her like my own daughter. She was angry, but I would never hurt her." Hunter pressed on, his voice relentless. "You were afraid of what she might do. You knew she could ruin everything. What happened that night, John?" John's eyes filled with tears, and he buried his face in his hands. "I didn't mean to hurt her. We argued, she pushed me and I pushed back. She fell and there was blood. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." Hunter felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The truth was finally coming out. "John, you need to tell me everything. We need to know exactly what happened." John took a deep breath and began to recount the events of that night. Ava had confronted him again, demanding that he end the affair and tell Jane the truth. Their argument escalated, and in a moment of rage and fear, John lashed out. Ava fell, hitting her head on the nightstand. Seeing her lifeless body, John realized the gravity of what he had done. "I didn't mean to kill her," John repeated, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to stop her from destroying our lives." Hunter listened, his heart heavy with the weight of John's confession. Ava's death was a tragic result of a web of lies and betrayals. The truth was finally out, but the pain and loss it caused could never be undone. Hunter knew that John would face justice for his actions, but the real challenge would be helping Jane and the rest of the community heal from this devastating ordeal. The truth had been uncovered, but its consequences would ripple through their lives for years to come. Detective Hunter left the interrogation room, the weight of John's confession heavy on his shoulders. The case had taken a toll on everyone involved, but he felt a sense of grim satisfaction, knowing that the truth was finally out. Ava's death was no longer a mystery, and her killer would face justice. Hunter returned to his office and began to piece together the final report. He reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and John's confession, ensuring that everything was in order. As he worked, he couldn't help but reflect on the twists and turns of the investigation. He thought back to the initial days when Jane had been the prime suspect. Her grief-stricken state and the strained relationship with Ava had made her an easy target for suspicion. But as he delved deeper, he realized that Jane's love for her daughter, despite their conflicts, was genuine and unwavering. John was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict brought a sense of closure, but it was bittersweet. The community mourned Ava's loss, and the once respected John Matthews was now a pariah, his reputation irrevocably tarnished. In the end, the story of Ava Matthews was one of sorrow, but also of resilience and hope. It highlighted the fragile nature of human relationships and the profound impact of truth and justice. For Detective Hunter and the people of Riverwood, it was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, even in the face of life's darkest moments. Sebastian Thompson, a successful businessman, and Hazel, his homemaker wife, had been married for 15 years. Their marriage, once vibrant, had been faltering, prompting them to seek professional help. They enrolled in a retreat led by the renowned Dr. David Green, a charismatic therapist with a reputation for mending fractured relationships. On the fourth night of the retreat, Sebastian was found dead in their cabin. His death, initially appearing as a tragic accident, soon revealed darker undertones. The investigation uncovered a tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and manipulation. The affair between Hazel and Dr. Green, hidden from everyone but the two, was a catalyst for the events that unfolded. Dr. Green, once a beacon of hope for struggling couples, was now at the center of a murder investigation. His charming exterior masked a manipulative mind with financial motives. As the truth unraveled, it became clear that Sebastian's death was no accident, but a coldly orchestrated murder. This true crime story delves into the complex relationships, personal histories, and the sinister plot that led to Sebastian Thompson's untimely death. It examines the psychological manipulation employed by Dr. Green, the emotional turmoil of Hazel, and the meticulous investigation that brought the truth to light. This is the chilling account of a couple's therapy retreat that turned deadly, revealing the dark side of love and trust. The couple's therapy retreat was situated in a secluded, luxurious cabin in the mountains, surrounded by dense forests and picturesque views. The location was chosen to provide an escape from the daily stresses of life, offering a peaceful environment conducive to healing and introspection. As Sebastian and Hazel Thompson arrived at the retreat, they were greeted by Dr. David Green. With his warm smile and reassuring presence, he exuded confidence and empathy, instantly putting the participants at ease. Alongside Sebastian and Hazel, there were 3 other couples, each grappling with their own issues. The retreat kicked off with a group session, where each couple introduced themselves and shared their reasons for attending. Sebastian, tall and well-built, spoke with a hint of frustration in his voice. He expressed his desire to rekindle the love and trust that had diminished over the years. Hazel, petite and attractive, echoed his sentiments, though her eyes betrayed a deeper, unspoken sadness. Dr. Green facilitated the sessions with skill and sensitivity, creating an atmosphere of openness and vulnerability. He emphasized the importance of honest communication and trust, urging couples to confront their issues head-on. The initial sessions were intense, with emotions running high as old wounds were reopened. Sebastian and Hazel's interactions were Sebastianed by underlying tension. Sebastian's controlling nature clashed with Hazel's growing sense of independence. Their exchanges were fraught with resentment and unspoken accusations. Dr. Green seemed particularly attentive to their case, often singling them out for deeper analysis. In private sessions, the dynamics were different. Dr. Green focused on building rapport, carefully listening to their individual grievances. He offered Hazel a sympathetic ear, understanding her feelings of entrapment and frustration. For Sebastian, he played the role of a stern yet caring advisor, urging him to let go of his controlling tendencies. The other couples at the retreat observed the palpable tension between Sebastian and Hazel. They noticed how Dr. Green seemed to give Hazel more attention, often engaging her in deeper conversations. This did not go unnoticed by Sebastian, who began to feel a growing sense of unease. The retreat's idyllic setting provided a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil brewing beneath the surface. The towering pines and serene lake seemed to mock the chaos within the hearts of the participants. As the days progressed, the initial hope for reconciliation gave way to a sense of impending doom. Sebastian and Hazel's relationship, instead of healing, seemed to be unraveling further. Dr. Green's presence, once a source of comfort, became a point of contention. The other couples, too, began to sense that something was amiss, though they couldn't quite put their finger on it. As the retreat moved into its third day, the tension reached a boiling point. The stage was set for a tragic turn of events that would shatter the tranquil facade of the retreat and expose the dark secrets lurking beneath. Sebastian Thompson's life was a testament to hard work and ambition. Born into a middle-class family, he had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination and relentless effort. By the age of 45, he had secured a high-ranking position at a prestigious firm, earning a handsome salary and enjoying the perks of success. However, his professional achievements came at a cost. The long hours and constant pressure strained his personal life, creating a rift between him and Hazel. Sebastian's control issues stemmed from his desire for perfection. He demanded the best from himself and those around him, often leading to conflicts at home. His need to control every aspect of his life extended to his marriage, where he expected Hazel to conform to his ideals. This created a suffocating environment for Hazel, who felt increasingly trapped in a role she hadn't chosen. Hazel Thompson, in contrast, had led a more sheltered life. Growing up in a small town, she had married Sebastian young and dedicated herself to being a supportive wife and homemaker. Initially, she found fulfillment in this role, but as the years passed, she began to feel a deep sense of dissatisfaction. The love and attention she once received from Sebastian had dwindled, replaced by criticism and control. Hazel's discontent grew as she watched her husband thrive in his career, while her own aspirations were stifled. She longed for freedom, for a chance to explore her own identity outside the confines of her marriage. It was during this time of vulnerability that she met Dr. David Green. Dr. Green's background was shrouded in mystery. He was a charismatic figure, known for his ability to connect with people on a deep emotional level. His reputation as a skilled therapist had earned him a loyal following, and his retreats were highly sought after. However, beneath his polished exterior lay a manipulative mind. Dr. Green had a history of exploiting vulnerable individuals for personal gain. His charm and intelligence masked a dark side that few were aware of. He had a knack for identifying those who were emotionally fragile and used their insecurities to his advantage. Financial gain was a significant motivator for him, but so was the thrill of control. Hazel's vulnerability and dissatisfaction made her an easy target for Dr. Green. He began their affair with calculated precision, offering her the attention and validation she craved. Their interactions started innocently enough, with late-night conversations and sympathetic listening. Gradually, he intensified his influence, making Hazel dependent on his approval and guidance. Dr. Green's manipulation extended beyond the affair. He subtly planted seeds of doubt and resentment in Hazel's mind, exacerbating the existing tension in her marriage. He portrayed himself as the only one who truly understood her, driving a wedge between her and Sebastian. His ultimate goal was to remove Sebastian from the equation, both to deepen his control over Hazel and to gain financially. Sebastian, unaware of the affair, sensed a shift in Hazel's behavior. She became more distant and withdrawn, often disappearing for hours without explanation. His attempts to confront her were met with defensiveness and anger, further straining their relationship. He turned to Dr. Green for guidance, unaware that the man he trusted was orchestrating his downfall. Dr. Green's plan was meticulous. He exploited the trust placed in him by both Sebastian and Hazel, using their therapy sessions to manipulate their emotions. He created scenarios that heightened the conflict between them, pushing them to the brink. His aim was to drive Sebastian to a point of desperation, where he could be easily eliminated. As the retreat progressed, Dr. Green's influence over Hazel grew stronger. She became increasingly reliant on him, viewing him as her savior from a life of misery. Her perception of Sebastian shifted from a loving husband to an oppressive figure, a change fueled by Dr. Green's constant manipulation. The stage was set for a tragic culmination. Sebastian's frustration and Hazel's growing dependence on Dr. Green created a volatile mix, primed for a deadly outcome. Dr. Green, ever the puppet master, watched as his plan unfolded, confident in his ability to control the narrative. The affair between Hazel and Dr. Green began subtly, almost innocently. During the early sessions, Dr. Green took a special interest in Hazel, recognizing her vulnerability. He offered her a sympathetic ear and gentle words of encouragement, which she desperately needed. Their relationship escalated during private therapy sessions. Dr. Green's office, a cozy room with soft lighting and plush furniture, became a sanctuary for Hazel. She poured out her heart, sharing her frustrations and dreams. Dr. Green listened attentively, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers, making her feel seen and understood. Late-night conversations turned into secret rendezvous. They would meet in secluded spots around the retreat, hidden from the prying eyes of other participants. Their meetings were filled with whispered confessions and stolen kisses, each encounter deepening their bond. Hazel's internal conflict was intense. She felt a growing attachment to Dr. Green, yet guilt gnawed at her conscience. She loved Sebastian, or at least she thought she did. But the connection she felt with Dr. Green was unlike anything she had experienced. He made her feel alive, appreciated, and desired. Dr. Green, on the other hand, was playing a calculated game. He knew how to manipulate Hazel's emotions, feeding her insecurities and deepening her dependence on him. His motives were far from pure. Financial gain and control drove his actions. He saw Hazel not just as a lover, but as a pawn in his grander scheme. Their affair was a dangerous dance fraught with risk. Hazel's behavior became increasingly erratic, her guilt manifesting as anxiety and paranoia. She feared discovery, not just for the affair but for the growing realization that Dr. Green had a hold over her that she couldn't break. One evening, as they met in a secluded part of the retreat, Dr. Green's true nature began to surface. He spoke of their future together, painting a picture of a life free from Sebastian's control. Hazel, caught in his web, began to believe in the possibility of a new life. However, the cost of this new life was steep, and the shadows of doubt began to creep into her mind. Dr. Green's manipulation extended to Sebastian as well. He planted seeds of suspicion, subtly suggesting that Hazel's behavior was a reaction to Sebastian's controlling nature. He urged Sebastian to be more understanding and patient, all the while knowing that his advice would only exacerbate the tension. As the retreat progressed, the affair became more intense, the secrecy heightening the thrill and the danger. One evening, during a particularly heated session, the tension boiled over. Sebastian, feeling cornered and misunderstood, lashed out verbally. He accused Hazel of not trying, of already giving up on their marriage. Hazel, instead of responding, looked to Dr. Green for support. This small gesture was the breaking point for Sebastian. His face contorted with a mixture of hurt and rage, and he stormed out of the session. Dr. Green seized the opportunity to further manipulate Hazel. He comforted her, emphasizing how Sebastian's behavior was proof of his controlling nature. Hazel, emotionally fragile and desperate for validation, absorbed Dr. Green's words, her trust in him growing stronger. The other couples were taken aback by Sebastian's outburst. They had their own issues, but none had witnessed such a dramatic confrontation. Dr. Green addressed the group, explaining that sometimes conflicts needed to be brought to the surface to be resolved. His explanation was met with nods of understanding, though doubts lingered. Sebastian, alone and seething, wandered the retreat grounds. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing Hazel, not just to the problems in their marriage, but to Dr. Green himself. His mind raced with suspicions and fears, each thought more troubling than the last. He needed to find a way to reach Hazel, to break through the barriers that seemed to be growing between them. That night in their cabin, the atmosphere was tense and heavy with unspoken words. Sebastian tried to reach out to Hazel, to apologize and explain, but she was distant, her thoughts seemingly elsewhere. The silence between them was deafening, a stark contrast to the arguments that had filled the past days. Dr. Green, watching from the shadows, felt a sense of triumph. His plan was unfolding perfectly. The tension between Sebastian and Hazel was at its peak, and the stage was set for the next phase of his scheme. He knew that Sebastian was close to breaking, and all he needed was one final push. As the retreat moved into its fourth day, the sense of impending doom grew stronger. The other couples, though unaware of the full extent of the turmoil, sensed that something was terribly wrong. Dr. Green maintained his facade of professionalism, but his eyes betrayed a glint of anticipation. The stage was set for a tragic climax, one that would shatter the lives of those involved and expose the dark undercurrents that had been simmering beneath the surface. The tension, carefully cultivated by Dr. Green, was about to reach a deadly crescendo. The fourth night of the retreat was shrouded in an eerie stillness. The usual sounds of the forest seemed muted, and a heavy fog rolled in, enveloping the cabin in a ghostly embrace. Sebastian and Hazel had retired to their room after another tense day, the silence between them more oppressive than ever. Around midnight, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. The other couples, jolted from their sleep, rushed out of their rooms, confusion and fear etched on their faces. The source of the scream was unmistakable. It came from Sebastian and Hazel's cabin. Dr. Green, appearing composed yet concerned, quickly took charge. He directed the others to stay back while he entered the cabin. Inside, he found Hazel, pale and trembling, standing over Sebastian's lifeless body. The room was in disarray, signs of a struggle evident. Sebastian lay on the floor, his eyes wide open in a final expression of shock and pain. There were visible bruises on his neck, and a broken lamp lay nearby, its jagged edges stained with blood. Hazel, in a state of shock, kept muttering that she didn't know what happened, that she had woken up to find him like this. Dr. Green, masking his satisfaction, wrapped his arm around Hazel, guiding her away from the scene. He assured the other participants that he would handle the situation and contacted the local authorities. Within minutes, the tranquility of the retreat was shattered by the arrival of police and paramedics. The initial investigation pointed to foul play. The signs of struggle and the nature of Sebastian's injuries indicated a violent confrontation. Hazel, as the only other person in the room, became the prime suspect. She was taken into custody for questioning, her dazed state complicating the initial interrogation. Dr. Green, playing the role of the concerned therapist, vouched for Hazel. He explained to the police that she had been under immense stress and that Sebastian had been aggressive. He painted a picture of a woman pushed to her limits, subtly suggesting that she might have acted in self-defense. The police, while not entirely convinced, took Dr. Green's statements into account. They began piecing together the events leading up to the murder. Other participants were interviewed, and it became clear that the Thompsons' relationship had been in turmoil. The tension between them, coupled with Sebastian's controlling nature, provided a potential motive. However, as the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in Hazel's account began to emerge. She couldn't clearly remember the events of the night, her memories a foggy jumble of fear and confusion. Her emotional state was fragile, and she seemed genuinely distraught over Sebastian's death. Dr. Green continued to support Hazel, maintaining his role as her confidant and protector. He provided the police with additional details, carefully crafting a narrative that supported his version of events. He portrayed Sebastian as a domineering husband, and Hazel as a victim driven to desperation. As the police delved deeper, they uncovered the affair between Hazel and Dr. Green. This revelation added a new dimension to the case. The affair provided a potential motive for Hazel, but it also raised questions about Dr. Green's involvement. His influence over Hazel was evident, and some investigators began to suspect that he might have had a hand in the events. Dr. Green, sensing the growing suspicion, remained calm and cooperative. He deflected attention from himself, emphasizing his role as a therapist trying to help a troubled couple. His charm and professionalism worked in his favor, but the police weren't entirely convinced. The discovery of the affair shifted the focus of the investigation. Hazel, now seen as both a suspect and a victim, faced intense scrutiny. Dr. Green, while not officially a suspect, was under the radar. The stage was set for a complex and convoluted investigation, with multiple layers of deception and manipulation to unravel. As the night wore on, the sense of tragedy and confusion deepened. Sebastian's death, initially seen as a tragic accident, now appeared to be a murder driven by hidden motives and dark secrets. The serene retreat had become the scene of a chilling crime, and the truth was far from clear. The police investigation into Sebastian Thompson's death quickly intensified. Detective Sarah Collins, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail, was assigned to the case. She arrived at the retreat the morning after the murder, determined to uncover the truth behind the tragic event. Detective Collins began by interviewing the other participants. Their accounts painted a picture of escalating tension between Sebastian and Hazel. Most of them mentioned Dr. Green's unusual interest in Hazel and his seemingly antagonistic stance towards Sebastian. The affair, already known to the police, became a focal point in her inquiry. In her interview with Hazel, Detective Collins noticed the woman's fragility and confusion. Hazel's account of the night was fragmented and inconsistent. She repeatedly claimed she couldn't remember what had happened, that she had woken up to find Sebastian dead. Her emotional distress seemed genuine, yet Collins couldn't ignore the possibility that Hazel was involved. Dr. Green was interviewed next. He maintained his composed demeanor, offering a polished account of his interactions with Sebastian and Hazel. He admitted to the affair, describing it as a regrettable but understandable consequence of Hazel's unhappy marriage. He framed himself as a supportive figure, trying to help Hazel through her emotional turmoil. Despite his cooperative attitude, Detective Collins couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Green was hiding something. His responses were too calculated, too perfect. She decided to delve deeper into his background, looking for any signs of past misconduct. The retreat's other participants provided further insights. Several of them mentioned the escalating arguments between Sebastian and Hazel, and a few noted that Dr. Green seemed to exacerbate these conflicts rather than resolve them. One participant, a woman named Rachel, mentioned overhearing a particularly heated argument between Sebastian and Hazel the night before the murder. Detective Collins followed up on Rachel's lead, examining the retreat's layout and the possibility of others hearing the argument. The cabin's isolated location made it unlikely that anyone outside could have heard, suggesting that Rachel might have been closer than she admitted. Collins began to consider the possibility of other witnesses or accomplices. The forensic team provided crucial evidence. The bruises on Sebastian's neck indicated strangulation, and the broken lamp suggested a violent struggle. However, there were no defensive wounds on Hazel, raising questions about her involvement in the physical altercation. The presence of an unidentified fingerprint on the lamp added another layer of mystery. As the investigation progressed, Collins discovered financial irregularities linked to Dr. Green. Large sums of money had been transferred from Hazel's account to an offshore account in Dr. Green's name. This revelation pointed to a clear financial motive, suggesting that Dr. Green had been manipulating Hazel not just emotionally, but financially as well. Armed with Hazel's partial recollection and the financial evidence, Detective Collins confronted Dr. Green. His calm facade cracked as he faced the mounting evidence. The fingerprint on the broken lamp, initially unidentified, was found to belong to Dr. Green. This evidence, combined with Hazel's testimony and the financial trail, solidified the case against him. Dr. Green's manipulative tactics had backfired, leaving a trail of evidence that pointed directly to him. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rachel Foster, meticulously laid out the evidence against Dr. Green. They highlighted his manipulative tactics, the financial exploitation of Hazel, and the clear motive behind Sebastian's murder. Witnesses, including Hazel and other retreat participants, testified about the escalating tension and Dr. Green's undue influence. The jury, after deliberating for several hours, found Dr. Green guilty of first-degree murder and financial exploitation and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In the end, the truth had been uncovered, and justice had been served. The scars left behind were deep, but they were also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Hazel and the other survivors found a way to move forward, their experiences shaping a future where trust and healing could coexist.